Okay, good morning, council staff. I'm going to call this meeting to order, and I can confirm that we have quorum. I believe we have everyone present other than Councillor Fitzgerald, so he might be just late zooming in. As council knows, the clerks have assigned movers and seconders to all motions, so if there's any objections to when your name's called, just let me know. I have a resolution moved by Councillor Withy and seconded by Councillor Stone as recommended the general committee meeting agenda dated Wednesday, December 16th, 2020 be adopted as printed and circulated. All in favor? That carries. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, we will start right into our deputations, and the first is Nancy Cohen from Safe Quiet Lakes with an annual update. Nancy, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Hello.
Great. Welcome.
Thank you.
Do you have a screen to share? Or?
I do. So I will do that. So thank you. First of all, thank you very much for the opportunity to present today. We have a lot of work that we're doing, and we're very excited. I am very excited to tell you about it. This is an update. I came to council in 2017, some of you might remember, with a presentation on our survey results. So this will be an update, and we have two particular projects that I'm very excited to tell you about, and to invite you to partner with us on. I am a beginner at screen sharing there. So first off, just a slight small introduction. So our mission is to make the Muskoka Lake safer and quieter for all to enjoy. We believe since the beginning, this has been our position, that positive grassroots conversations and education are really important drivers of change. And we created this Voters Code to really help us get the message out. We've installed it at public marinas, public boat launches, marinas, resorts, and we distribute it in cards as well. The OPP has been distributing it on their safety checks. Our action plan is driven by the results of the two very large surveys that we fielded in 2013 and 2017. The second survey had a response rate of over 3,000, including many people from the Huntsville area. We heard in these surveys, we heard that responders were very concerned with safety, noise, wakes, and boat traffic, particularly noise from boat engines and boat traffic. This would be people going too fast, too close to shore. These concerns were shared by about 80% of the respondents, so that's quite good agreement. Our core activities are outreach, advocacy, and building partnerships, such as why I'm here. We also have wonderful partnerships with many lake associations in the Huntsville area, including like a Bays Association, Lake Vernon, Ferry, Mary Lake, and so on, and Huntsville OPP. I'm going to tell you quickly about our summer highlights, but I really want to focus on our two exciting new programs. So this summer, as everybody knows, was a very different summer on the lakes. We had enormous amount of traffic, boat traffic, and we were really happy to be able to continue our program, Pivot digitally. We continued our newsletter, which is an education newsletter, to our over 2,000 contacts monthly. We held 2 very successful webinars on boat safety and the rules. And so we are very pleased about that. The 2 programs, the first one, Wakes and Speed Project. This project is very exciting for us, and I think for all of the lakes in our area. The project goal is to promote and install consistent visual messaging across the Muskokas. This would be on-water messaging supported by a comprehensive educational campaign. And you can see here the loon test sign that we did this summer. This would be one aspect. And the VOR signage here, you can see it in tiny, explaining the close to shore speed limit. This summer, we tested tactics in conjunction with Town of Muskoka Lakes and the MLA on the Indian River and Mirror Lake. And if you know those rivers, that area, it's extremely busy all summer on the way in and out of Port Carling. The project consisted of signs, especially the VOR signage, which is so VOR, vessel operating restricted regulations. I'm sorry, I don't remember exactly ever. That signage, which is regulatory signage, is the responsibility of the municipality. And in this case, we worked with TML to get about 25 signs erected along the river. We engaged the community also with educational backdrop and also some articles in the Muskokan. This project we want to carry further into the rest of the municipality so that we can all have consistent signage and all boaters can be made aware of the issues. The second project is also very exciting. As I said before, there were about a very large number of our respondents who had very concerns about boat noise, and perhaps you've heard about it as well. As you know, boating regulations are federal in Canada, and there's not much that a town council itself can do about on-water noise. Our goal is to bring in federal decibel limits for boat engine noise. The current Canadian law is very difficult to enforce. We've been talking a lot to the OPP and working with them on that. We also know that the US and the EU have had decibel limits in place for years on manufactured engines, and there are very robust standards that are efficient and effective to enforce. So we are working hard to build a broad coalition of support for these changes, which would be not new regulation, just enhancements to existing regulation. We have support from our local lake associations, the MLA, Lake of Bays Association, Georgian Bay Association, and are working across the country to develop that broad base. And we will come back to you with more details, seeking your support in the new year. So thank you again for the opportunity to come here. We really would love to work with you on both of these projects. The Wakes and Speed project is to work with your local lake associations and your staff to implement these programs. And I look forward to coming back to talk to you specifically about the Decibel Coalition, and of course, and invite you also to partner with us financially to keep these projects going. Like many other small organizations, we're not for profit, funded entirely by donations. This is a list of top level donors in our region. I very much appreciate your time today, and we look forward to your questions.
Thanks very much, Nancy. If you stop sharing your screen, then I can see our council for questions again.
Yes.
Perfect. So that's great. And I must say, most of the emails and calls we get on the water are about speed and wakes and safety. So very interesting presentation. I'm going to open it up to council for questions. Councillor Stone.
Two questions, actually. So the 9-kilometer speed limit signs, as far as I know, boats don't have speedometers on them. How do I know if I'm going 7 kilometers or 12 kilometers? And the second question would be about the OPP. Are you working with them?
Okay. So first, yes, that is difficult. It's hard to know if you're going 9 kilometers an hour, and some boats at 9 kilometers, there is a minimum speed they can go and still maintain the ability to go steer. However, in Canada, they specifically say there's no way we can have a no wake regulation, because even ducks make wakes. You may have heard various people say that to you around this table. So they settled on, actually it's 10 kilometers an hour almost everywhere in Ontario. In the Muskokas, it's 9 kilometers an hour, and in some places it's 5 kilometers an hour, places on the Muskoka River and so on. So how do you know? So that's part of our education campaign, is to talk about how you know. That's about the fast walking speed, or giving people different ways to judge their speed. Also, it's really important. It's not only how fast you're going, but the kind of wake that you project. So if you're a boater, you know that too. When you're slowing down, you need to really just let your boat level out first. That kind of messaging is part of our campaigns. Yes, we work with the OPP locally to get our message out. This summer, they weren't distributing our cards because of the restrictions, but in a normal summer, they give out our cards in their routine safety checks. We also have a very good relationship with the Marine, the head of Central Marine Training in Aurelia. We really like to build these positive relationships to get everybody working in the same direction.
Councillor Withey.
Thank you, Worship, and thank you, Nancy, for your presentation. So one of the things that I see a lot, I don't actually see a lot, but I know a lot, some about, is that the proliferation of this wake surfing stuff, which is, you're probably familiar, boaters fill up this huge bladder of water inside their boat in order to make the hugest wake possible so they can surf behind it. And often they go into smaller bays where the water's calmer to do this, which takes them closer to shore. I was wondering if there's any sort of movement. I mean, I don't know how you brought it up yourself. It's hard to enforce any of this stuff. But one of the things, when I was on council before, there was a discussion around designating particular zones on lakes for particular activities. So, for example, where there's a marshy area where it's likely going to be home to loons' nests and things like that. And then maybe across the lake, it's all bedrock right down to the shore and into the water, where a wake wouldn't cause any damages. So looking at perhaps publishing a map that says, okay, do your wakeboarding over here where it's going to be less of an issue. Over on this side of the lake is more sensitive as far as the erosion and wildlife. I didn't notice that in your presentation. Is there any sort of thought to these kinds of things?
Yes, definitely. We love that idea. We don't have it in this presentation, but we are quietly working on that in the background. And when it's ready,
oh, sorry for blowing your cover.
Getting that out, figuring out which areas are good designated. I know that there are some lakes in the eastern townships in Quebec that have worked that out. And I actually have a call this afternoon with one of those organizations to share ideas. So yes, we're definitely thinking about that. In the meantime, we're focused on general messaging to talk about wakes through, we have great partnerships with the marinas and ask them to hand out our cards and information as well. And the more we can all keep that conversation going, because it's really one-on-one, where in your particular area is good. And if you see somebody doing something dangerous, to approach them nicely, as hard as that is, and talk to them.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Alcock.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Nancy. I just wanted to say thank you to the organization for all the work they're doing. I once attended one of your meetings over in Muskoka Lakes and was so impressed with the people involved in the organization. I wanted to also say that I think the initiative around the Decibel Coalition seems like a great idea. And I was curious, you said that you're looking for a partnership with the municipalities and coming back in the new year. I noticed the township, their logo is already on your presentation. So have they already signed up for the Decibel initiative, or is that they just are sort of permanently partnering?
Those logos are top level sponsors, so financial contributions. We haven't, we have been focused first on lake associations and getting them on board for this coalition, and awaiting direction like on the best ways to approach municipalities. Like we understand boating, but we want your advice of, like, is it a resolution? Should we bring a letter? Like and we'll definitely come back in the most appropriate way in the winter.
That's very helpful. Thank you very much.
Okay. Councillor Armour.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you. Thanks, Nancy. My question has to do with the signage, the 9 kilometers and make. Are they available for the public to purchase to place on their docks? Something the municipalities are responsible to go out and place on their lakes?
The little red circles, the 9 kilometers an hour signs that indicate the VOR speed restrictions are regulatory signage. So they are the responsibility of the municipalities. However, one of the things that we want to do with this program is figure out some easy ways to get them out there, working with the town. So depending on how you want to do it, the Transport Canada has told us that you need to keep track of where those signs are because they're regulatory signs. And so just figuring out easy ways to do it. There's specific specifications for them, of course. It's like a 20-page book. However, they are, and last year, Township of Muskoka Lakes produced them, and we distributed them jointly, and we kept a list, and it's not complicated, and they're not expensive. I guess it depends on size. Also, we have our boaters code. We've put it up at most marinas and many resorts, but there may be opportunities in your area to put them at boat launches or say at the beautiful town docks or elsewhere. Or another idea is we put Township of Muskoka Lakes does a beautiful brochure every year. And they've put in boating information in there, and on Seguin has a lot of stuff on their website. So it depends how you like to work, and let us know who to talk to and how we can move this forward.
Okay, Nancy, thanks so much for that. I know that you're working with our Economic Development Officer, Scott Oval, to see if we have it can help out through our community grant program for some sponsorship, and we'll make sure that your contact information is also in the hands of our park manager, who tends to field a lot of the spring and summer questions regarding signage and everything on our lake. So we'll make sure that we keep those lines of communication open so that we can work together going forward.
Well, great. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks for your time today.
Thank you.
All right, Council, we are moving on to invited and ceremonial presentations. And our first one is Allison Phillips and Rachel Fraser. And I think Les Rant is here on our Kent Park design concepts. Let's see if we get everybody. And Steve's here.
Good morning, it's Allison.
Yeah, hi, Les is here as well.
Steve, do you have any introduction or?
I certainly can. I don't think Rachel was able to join us this morning, but we all know Les Ranta. Les is the lead on the project for the Main Street with EXP. And with the Kent Park project and the direction we are given, we have brought in Greenland Consulting, and that's Allison Phillips. Allison is no stranger to anybody throughout Huntsville. It's certainly been involved in the planning business. Allison has done many, many projects over the last 20 years in Huntsville. So when we asked her to get involved and help us with Kent Park, she was more than able and willing to get involved with their company, and certainly understands the Muskoka feel and concept. So we have gone through with Allison the background history on Kent Park. She's aware of the council meetings and discussions. She's watched some of that on live stream. So she understands what council was looking for, and she has a presentation for us today. It is not a completed or finished drawing. She will be looking for some direction, and then we hope to bring something back pending on council direction to move forward. So with that, I'll turn it over to Allison.
Good morning, Your Worship and Town Councillor. Stephen there gave a little bit of an intro. I can fill that in a little bit. I lived in the region from 1991 to 2010 and have a business, landscape architecture business in Huntsville. And I submitted numerous landscape plan applications to Town of Huntsville, Lake of Bays, Township of Seguin, Muskoka Lakes region for approval. And I shopped and enjoyed the Main Street of Huntsville for that time. I guess was involved in a few of those Midnight Madness and streetscape parties there. So I am very familiar with the town of Huntsville and how the Main Street functions in the winter and the summer with the influx of visitors. A lot of my design work and still going on in the region was based in estate residential design build, commercial, industrial, and institutional site plan application. Also some condominium development, shoreline and landscape restorations. So I am familiar, very familiar with the vernacular landscape of the area. And so with that little bit of explanation, I'll share the presentation boards here. Make sure I've got the right one. So can everyone see that? Yeah, okay. So with the design team, we decided to put together some image boards to kind of explain the design elements that I think that the town of Huntsville is looking for from the resolution elements that were provided. Our design team has provided some recommendations to these resolution elements. So I'll walk you through the design elements that are in the two concepts that we've presented. So in landscape, we talk about design elements being the spatial elements and the physical elements that you see in the landscape. So with regards to Muskoka, there's certain design elements that would be considered vernacular, which means they originate out of the natural landscape of the area. So in the design of this design concepts we presented, we've shown these design elements. The first one being a seeding node, and these seeding nodes are inspired by a lot that we see in the Muskoka region, a lot on waterfront properties. And these elements are inspired by these patios, the use of Muskoka chairs and natural stone to create kind of a surrounding area. So in the design concepts we presented, we've shown these seating nodes, which contain decorative granite landscape stones and some more armor stones that could be used for seating. And in this space would be paved and have enough space for a couple of 2 or 3 Muskoka chairs with potentially some kind of a granite stone or block for a table. So the second element that we're showing is a gazebo, and we have proposed either a square gazebo or a hexagonal gazebo. And the design elements on that, we've shown a couple examples of a square one or a hexagonal one. We would recommend that the gazebo structure be timber, and because it's kind of rustic and it fits in. And on these posts could be these piers or pilasters reminiscent of the signs, the piers. These are boulder stone piers on the Huntsville sign. And I guess part of the resolution was that a fireplace be provided. Now, in terms of fireplaces, I guess the two options that we were recommending is there's either gas, and the gas fire option provides a visual and a sensory experience with heat, and an electric fireplace as another option for a visual experience of fire. So within these gazebos could be built a hexagonal, probably would fit best in a hexagonal gazebo, or a square one in a square gazebo with a fireplace feature in that. We'd recommend if the fireplace feature is stone, that you could put a seating level hearth around it. and that the fireplace feature be accessible from all sides, so that it provides more opportunities for people to sit by and or view close up. This particular image here is kind of an example of an open fireplace within a gazebo. This is actually an interior, but the same kind of principle could be applied outside. Now, in terms of, I wanted to discuss materials a little bit, of how the materials could be used in the park. In terms of types of natural stone that's available, there's very guillotined or square cut armor stone. There's more natural armor stone, is more kind of irregularly shaped. There's kind of irregular granite rock, which could be used as decorative landscape stones. And then there's rounded or weathered boulder stones. So those are the kinds of different stones that you'll hear me speak about when I go over the concepts. In terms of paving in the park, there are pavers proposed within the streetscape. So we were recommending to continue to use those so that the park design fits in with the new streetscape. In the new streetscape, there's unit paving. The main color is this one here, and the accent color is kind of like a dark, almost not quite black, very dark gray. So in the concepts, we proposed either kind of a granite vein kind of pattern using these pavers to kind of create a random pattern that is reminiscent of the veins of different colors that you see going through granite rock. You can kind of see it when you're driving along the highway. And the options also, we thought for the seating nodes, if you want to go that way, you could use flagstone in the seating node areas to have a different kind of paving texture, which is very reminiscent of a lot of naturalized landscapes that you see in Muskoka Lakes. An option in terms of the piers on the gazebo, we would propose either like the split field stone, or you could use a square building stone. I think either would look good. If you want more of an architectural feel, you could go with a square building stone. In terms of plant materials, we would propose materials that are native and or can withstand streetscape conditions. With the site furnishings, there's some images here of some of the site furnishings that are proposed in the streetscape. There's the bike racks. I believe these are the proposed light fixtures, trash and recycling fixtures. These are the benches, and we were proposing that if in some of the more open spaces, you could utilize some fairly modern looking picnic tables if that was desired. And then there's, I guess, the park is very visible on the main street. So the park could be decorated seasonally for visual images and branding of the town. So I'll get into the concepts. The first concept we've shown here, the open space here is larger than concept 2, and it's open to the street. So there's a clear view into the open space. So this open space is larger so that it can accommodate larger gatherings. And in this particular concept, we've shown a square structure, a 20-foot structure. This space could accommodate a hexagonal structure as well. We've just shown a square one in this particular option. So the open space here is surrounded by an edge of decorative landscape stones and seating wall stones or natural armor stone to provide additional seating around its edge here if this area is accommodating a larger group. There's 3 seating nodes proposed in this particular design, one fairly close to the street and a couple more that are within the park. If there's something going on here, these seating nodes all have a view of the open space. The paving pattern proposed in this is kind of the granite vein pattern. And so we use a light color, the base light color here as this infill, and then the dark being the contrasting color. Along this edge, we're proposing a privacy fence. These green circles represent deciduous and coniferous. We've not shown a lot of coniferous in that we want the space to be open visually from the street, in keeping with SEPTA guidelines. We've proposed a couple of light standards towards the rear of the site to light this area here. There's also an existing light standard right here so that the park is well lit. We've shown a couple of bike racks fairly close to the entrance, a couple here and one there. And then there's also an entrance from either corner of the park. Now this area along the back has been landscaped here in case some additional access is required here. So we've placed no fixed structures in this area in the rear of the park. This coniferous tree we've placed here so that when you're up the street, if seasonally at this time of year, it can be lit and it can be seen from up the street. These seating notes, as I spoke about before, would have, you could fit 3 Muskoka chairs in and provide a couple of stone blocks for tables as well. The other thing in this design is that we've got a couple of trees kind of floating on this granite, these granite veins to kind of provide some more shade within the paved area, open space of the park. Now these seating nodes could be paved with unit paving or flagstone as a contrast to the main part of the square. Now in concept 2, we're showing as a contrast a 28 structure hexagonal structure. This concept, it could be square as well, so they're interchangeable. This concept is a little bit closer to what is there now. It's more private and the open space is not as large. So it would not be able to accommodate as large a gathering as concept 1. So this concept's a little bit more private. We provided two seating areas, one kind of associated with the street and then one more private in the back. This paving pattern is a little different in that it would be more like a speckled paving pattern, like the main color with flecks of black in it, kind of like granite can be colored that way as well. We've shown 3 bike racks at the entrance here as per the existing concept. So those are in this concept 2, also we moved the coniferous tree that could be lit seasonally right next to the street. this concept too is also lined with a decorative stone and a armor stone for additional seating as well. And I think the lighting is proposed much in a similar manner. And that's the difference really between those. There's also a privacy fence along this side as well. So those are the two concepts, and I'm looking for some feedback as to which ones you like and what design elements that you like as well.
Okay, Allison, thank you. I will get you to stop sharing the screen just so that I can see council in case there's any questions at this time.
Can't I see that? Okay. There we go.
Yeah, we still have your screen.
Okay. I can't find that. The button that comes up. Oh, hold on. It's behind my microphone. Excuse me.
There we go.
There we go.
You so much. Okay, so council, we will deal with this as we move on to the meeting, but if there's any specific questions for Allison or Les while they're here, now's the time to ask them. Deputy Mayor Alcock.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Allison, for that presentation. I know we're going into the full discussion later, but I did want to say thank you for a number of the concepts you put forward, because there are some things from my perspective I quite like. And so you specified around the different types of stone, and I really like you were very clear on what each looks like. And if you go to your first presentation slide, in the upper left corner, you've got one of the seating areas on the flagstone, which I like, and you've got what is large river rock, or whatever you called that, presentation rock. But there was a boulder, a round boulder sort of right beside that. And I really liked that. I thought that was great. And so was it your intention to have that kind of thing, maybe 3 spaces in one of the concepts with that kind of mixture in amongst the natural armor stone? Is that confusing, that question? That one picture really liked, and it was partially because of the juxtaposition of the small round rocks with the larger boulder, plus the natural armor stone, so people could sit. So was that an accurate description of what you were describing? Yes.
I guess on board 1, there's a blow up of the seating area there. So I would propose using a combination of kind of more naturally shaped pieces with some armor stone in between. So it's not such a solid line of one kind of stone. So you could have like a more like a natural, I call it a landscape stone, that's more naturally shaped, and then some armor, 2 or 3 armor stones with a more natural shape. So it's not all one line.
That's excellent. Thank you. That's sort of what I was looking at. And in fact, the rest of it, though, you do have they define the edge, whole sections of the natural armor stone. And I wondered if you had thought about maybe breaking that edge up a little bit. I mean, I recognize it's what we need for seating and stuff, but there are there's quite a bit of that sort of linked. And I wondered if you had thought about maybe breaking that up a little bit.
Yes, it can be broken up, and I would say it can be broken up in areas where the grade will permit. Like at this level, we haven't got a handle on what those grades are. So where planting bed could meet the paving edge in areas where there isn't a large change in grade, it could come straight to the paving. So it could be broken up a little bit.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. And I do have another question, but I know others do. So if I could come back in a bit. Thank you.
Okay.
Councillor Weed.
Thank you, Your Worship. I guess I would just add to that, to Nancy's comments. I really like the idea of breaking up the uniformity of it. I would even go so far as to say, don't be shy about putting in some, the odd stone that's twice the size. That would really kind of give it some real texture. I think that could really lend itself to more texture, more visually interesting, and even create, almost privacy areas within the park. So that could be a really nice touch too. So I like the comments I've heard, and don't be scared to be bold.
Yeah, we could certainly use some larger pieces. Just need a bigger machine. So.
Councillor Schumacher.
Thank you, through you, Your Worship, to Allison. So in the two concepts, you have one with sort of that stripe pattern in the granite and the other one with the speckled pattern in the granite. I know we've had some conversation at our accessibility committee with someone, say, who has low vision or vision impairments, but can see sort of some light and different shades. And sometimes that sort of different grades in color does make it difficult for them to see, or the depth perception for them. Do you have any sort of background in knowing which one would be better?
High contrast is good. Normally, the contrast is desirable on the edges so that visually impaired people can perceive edges, or whether they're entering a more busy space. Within the paving pattern, I think that's something that I would have to investigate further, if that would be potentially difficult to navigate, or maybe create some confusion. I think it's something that I would have to confirm.
Deputy Mayor Alcock, you had a second question?
Thank you, Your Worship. And it's quick. I like, Allison, the comment about being open, and especially with concept one, sort of open and airy and visually open. And so on the tree plantings, you said less of the coniferous, more of the deciduous. And I guess my comment is on the plantings themselves. I think if it's to be consistent with the Main Street streetscape, we talked about natural plantings that, you would see if you were at the cottage or wherever. Certainly that's what we're hoping to do. And I'm assuming that that's what you're talking about in your seating areas, or somewhere where you've identified the planting areas. And I wondered if you had thought that we should focus more on that, and maybe actually have fewer trees, because trees will grow and they're going to be big, and I just, your thoughts on the balance around that will be helpful for the discussion.
Sorry, the balance between trees and
just
lower plant material?
I think you've taken note of recommending fewer conifers, and having more of the deciduous, but deciduous also grow to be big trees. So I'm just wondering if there's, in both concepts, you show actually quite a few trees. So I'm wondering if it would make sense to consider having fewer trees and more of the natural plantings, the natural vegetation that might be smaller and lower to the ground in certain places. It's just a general question around that.
Yeah, the visualization, the concept is, it's visual to kind of show an idea where plantings could go. to move into a more detailed planting plan, that if the desire is to have fewer trees and we provide them with enough root zones so that they grow large, then yes, there's definitely option there to reduce the amount of trees or deciduous trees, to create kind of a naturalized planting. Typically in naturalized plantings, that we would find near the cottage, a lot of them are shaded. So in planting design, I would typically try and create shade and then some understory shrubs with ground cover. So if it's sunnier, then the dynamic of the plant material changes. So, I mean, either it can be adjusted to whatever the dynamic is that you want, whether you want more open sun or more of a shaded planting scheme. So the number of trees is definitely variable and up for discussion.
Okay, thank you for that.
Okay, Allison, just one quick question on either concept. The area that you left fairly open and you said it would be landscaped. Do you envision grass there? The sort of brownish area? Like, what's the treatment there?
Around the edge in the back, towards the back?
Yeah.
I would just see that as either like low ground covers. Ground typically kind of to landscape visualizations would mean mulch with ground cover. So in here, that's in that back corner, that's what that area would be planted in a natural style.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further questions at this time? Okay, so thank you guys for that presentation and for the drawings. And we have another presentation, and then we'll be moving into our committee meeting and we'll have further discussion on this. Okay, our next presentation is from the Executive Director of the Chamber of Commerce, Kelly Haywood, I believe is with us. Kelly, welcome. And,
morning.
Are you going to present on screen as well, or?
Yes, I am. And Torrin Sotheby is with me as well. He's going to also co-present.
Welcome, both of you.
Thank you. Let me just pull up my presentation. While I'm presenting, I'm going to turn my video off because I have terrible bandwidth. So good morning. Thank you for having us. We're here today to give you our sort of annual update. We'll be presenting to you twice a year as per our MOU that we have for our community marketing initiative and our tourism services arrangement with the municipality. Our last report was 2 weeks after Snowfest last year. So it's been a while, and it was just about 2 weeks before the sort of COVID lockdown started to happen. So kind of gives us literally what we're presenting right now is the period of which we've been, in the worst of it for COVID. And I applaud this council for everything that you've been doing and appreciate your support. Just looking back then, with that being said, during the period of which we've been looking at, particularly this whole COVID situation, we did a great deal of alignment with community partners. Obviously, at the outset, it was a very confusing time. We weren't sure how long it was going to take, like everyone. There was a lot of sort of spinning. We worked very closely with Scott Oval and Morgan Richter from the BIA, and we had a really excellent collaboration and pulled together some great programs. We met very regularly and formed, an even better team. We already were a great team working together, but I can't thank Scott Oval enough for, the support and his availability and his ideas and cooperation have been excellent. And of course, Morgan Richter has been such a great addition to our community as a BIA manager. So we're just such a great team. So what we did, though, knowing, there was a number of things in terms of virtual events, Save Summer, and that sort of thing. We did some marketing that we're going to talk about more, but we did take the time to focus very much on developing grant applications, knowing that when we came out of this, it was going to be tricky. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. And I'll hand it over to Torn to give you an overview of our digital presence. I'll just start, though, by, reminding everyone our Huntsville Adventures page is what we're using as our official tourism page for the community. We have great links from your municipal page to it. We're always open to feedback on it, and we're developing it even more with some great support from the province, from the Accommodation Tax Board, and of course from your council. So we'll talk a little bit about our digital presence, and I'll hand it over to Torn.
Yeah, so just a very high level overview of what we've been doing to keep the site up to date over. Oh, Kelly, if you don't mind going back there.
Yep.
Yeah, just a very high level overview of what we've been doing to keep the site up to date since March. We've continued to ensure that the website is populated with current and engaging content, which is really the most important thing for SEO. It has to be relevant content, always has to be updated, and we're making sure that we have lots of blogs on there all the time and lots of business listings, just everything up to date. We're making sure that in the back end, it's up to date with current best practices in terms of site speed, again, search engine optimization on the back end, that type of thing. We're continuously improving the accessibility and readability of the site. And again, we've been doing a lot of SEO tactics to gain website ranking. So further to that on the next slide, as I mentioned, we've been keeping the content up to date since March. It's been a little different this year in terms of we've had to switch a little bit to promoting more things like day trips, to promoting to a slightly more local audience. However, we have been continuously producing the content to keep the site up to date, and we produced 17 campaigns this year. These included anything from hiking, golf, shopping, where to dine, to things like the more local things like gardening, groceries, and just things like that. In addition, we've continued to build the photography and video database that we are ready to launch once we can really get back into the external digital marketing. We have an additional budget for that coming for the winter, and that's a high priority coming up. Then on the next slide, Kelly. So in support of the content campaigns that we have written all year, we also have very targeted social media and email marketing campaigns that have continued to promote them. As I mentioned, again, it's shifted towards more local markets, so Huntsville and day trippers from Perry Sound, that type of thing is what we've been looking at. And a lot of this was done through the partnerships that Kelly mentioned before, which included a big part of the campaign was the Cottage Country Spirit campaign, which was a voucher and digital marketing campaign that we did with RTO 12 and was hosted on the Huntsville Adventures website and social media platforms.
Okay. Thank you, Torn. Also, I think, as things started to reopen, as Torn indicated, we did focus a great deal on gardening, golf, patios, a lot of local initiatives, and certainly continued with a good social media presence. So looking back then, in terms of tourism services as well, it was an excellent summer for many businesses for tourism. I think that, obviously we know there was a number of seasonal residents who were here, and we are grateful. Obviously our businesses proved to have great protocols in place, and hopefully that remains to be the same. We are very, very pleased to continue to operate out of the municipal building downtown. We have an office currently. We'll be moving out by the end of February. I understand that your team needs a bit more space as a result of COVID, and have been working with your team we'll just be moving up to the box office. Oops. Oh, start my video. Thank you. We'll be moving into the box office office, you know, when it is, which is great. And I hope we can continue to keep a presence at the town hall, because I think it's a really great opportunity, not only for us to welcome visitors and provide customer service, but also I think it's great assistance to customer service for your building and for your team. Pardon me. A lot of people ask us about tourism services and if they think it's still relevant. Do people still come in? And I can tell you that we did see a great increase in the number of people that were looking for information. Pardon me. We do see, you know, a lot of people just popping in for a really quick question. And that gives us an opportunity to upsell. Do you know where you're going for dinner? Did you know about, you know, Arrowhead Provincial Park? Because a lot of them are going to Algonquin, for example. Did you know about, you know, so we really work hard at trying to spread them around the community. So just in terms of our budget for last year, you'll see that your contribution at the bottom is what I've noted. So $50,000 directed 100% to administration of community marketing, and as is the $32,000 for tourism services. So every other dollar that's used for any actual marketing is leveraged from the $50,000 that you give us. So outside of that, this year, we saw, you know, a digital marketing spend. We also saw, from an events perspective, is where we worked with, well, we didn't do Muskoka Maple Festival this year, but we did do the trail and a little bit on Girlfriend's Getaway Weekend. So still a great opportunity to see, you know, preparation for next year. I think we're well positioned. And I spoke about our digital marketing spend that Torrin referred to. So looking forward, we are in fact strategizing for a bright future. I say that because we're looking at a great lighting initiative, as you're aware. I think we have an extremely resilient community. I hope that we can continue to work very closely with our partners. And as I indicated, we have a great team. In terms of upcoming digital marketing, again, Torrin, I'll let you speak about this and then we'll come back.
Yeah, so the big campaign that we have coming up in the near future, again, COVID dependent, we don't know exactly when the near future would be. We originally intended this campaign to launch in the fall. We've pushed back a few times. We're now looking at late January, but again, understanding that that likely will push back again at this point. But the big campaign that we have coming up is a campaign themed Winter Adventure Your Way. So this is the COVID Recovery Collaborative Marketing Campaign that we have organized with Major Tom Marketing Agency. So it's a highly targeted campaign that is focused on increasing the awareness of Huntsville as a winter destination with outdoor, cultural, and dining options, as well as increasing overnight stays. So this is basically as a direct result of the Polaris survey that we had that was done for Huntsville, just saying that we need to increase Huntsville's awareness in the winter. So we took this to a marketing agency, brought the info to them, and have been working with them since the fall to put together the plan to do this. As I mentioned, we're hoping to launch late January, but maybe push back. And it's going to be promoted through a wide variety of different platforms that include Facebook and Instagram, Google, YouTube. We're going to be working with specific partners on specific websites such as Blog.to to promote the campaign. And then a new one for us, which is Kloop, which basically, if anyone will be mentioning Nordic skiing this winter, we can target them with an ad to say, come to Huntsville to Nordic ski. In addition, we're hoping to work with the Municipal Accommodation Tax and RCO 12 on another Winter Wonders voucher program, if it can happen. So this would be the digital marketing campaign and voucher program that we did with them last year. We're hoping to see that happen again. And then we're also waiting to hear back about our spring 2021 COVID-19 recovery plan, which is a grant that we've applied to FedNor for. So We're currently in stage 2. We haven't heard about final funding, but it would just give us further digital marketing funding for the year at this point. And then further to that, we are continuously updating the website, as I mentioned earlier, but I just wanted to give you a few specifics on what we're looking at in the near future for this. So we're in the middle of doing an extensive website SEO review for HuntsvilleAdventures.com. We're fixing any of the issues that might be impacting the crawling and indexing by different search engines. And this includes looking at content, keywords, metadata, and many other things. So we started this process about a month ago with a search engine optimization specialist, and he has reported the whole campaign was based on organic search visits, so that we know that people are finding us without paid campaigns. And the first month came back and we saw an increase of 48% in organic site visits in November compared to November 2019. So we know it's working. Following all these SEO updates, we will be doing further design updates throughout 2021.
Thank you, Jordan. And then in terms of events, certainly we are still looking at planning ahead. So again, for the Maple Trail, Maple Festival, Flavors of Ontario, Girlfriend's Getaway Weekend. We are, obviously talking about the Interactive Light event that's happening in the late winter. We're watching obviously very closely what's happening with COVID. That event will happen if it's just downtown. We're also expanded into Grandview at the 9-hole course, generously donated by Claude Dowdy. We will be organizing an outdoor winter park that will include Nordic skiing, fat biking. It will be lit, it will be beautiful, it will be free. It will divert people away from Arrowhead Provincial Park, which we're working closely with them on that. They're very aware of it and happy about it. It will be an excellent outdoor opportunity for people to just get outside, lots of space. We'll obviously be continuing to promote Lions Lookout Field and Trail, but I think we have a lot to look forward to for our winter and spring products. Oops, sorry. Next. So in terms of the enhanced marketing resources, you'll see here for this next year, we've been approved for $344,250, which is really exciting and excellent. We have pending grants, as Torin mentioned, one of which we're just waiting for a response any day. And then we've applied for another one through a special Trillium Resilient Communities Fund. So those two are pending. And then we have identified 3 others that we'll be writing. In terms of Celebrate Ontario, that'll depend on, what the future of events looks like. Volunteer Muskoka, just really briefly, we had a collaboration years and years ago. The municipality took it over and now we have it back. So we'll be working on developing this over the winter, and we'll be certainly looking to look for expanded funding for this initiative as well, to ensure that our volunteers are, well organized and have a place to call and to, so if you want more detail about that, I can let you know at our next presentation. So in terms of our projected finances, you'll see that our budget now is $1.2 million. This includes obviously a great collaboration with the accommodation tax, which has proven to be incredible in our community and such a great group to work with. So that's primarily what the product development is at this point. And then a great deal of spend on digital marketing, particularly in the investment of our digital presence, and an increase in tourism services as well. So, just to wrap up, I do want to say that we're doing a bit of a research project also to see where we stand with communities our size, tax base, similar product, and where we are, in the marketplace with respect to spend, with respect to how we're comparing in general. We did a great survey through the accommodation tax group, and we're hoping to build on that and continue surveying. And if nothing else, just to understand where we compare. I can tell you that at a very quick glance, budget wise, for the size of our community and for the scope of our community, I'm quite certain that we're going to come in very low. So it's something we need to look at collaborating stronger on. I think I'm not just saying money. I think we just need to, in my previous slide, I talked about a grant for a tourism development plan, and that's something that I'll be coming to you about, really developing a strong tourism strategy in general. So that's all I have for today. I want to thank you very much for your support. And I will stop sharing.
Okay, thanks Kelly and Torrin for that presentation, and we'll see if there's any questions from council. Yes, Deputy Mayor Alcock.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Kelly and Torrin, for a great presentation. Boy, there's so much going on and so many things, eh? It's exciting, especially the new initiative out at Grandview. That's really neat too. I do have a specific question, and Torrin, a lot of information around the digital marketing, and I think that's great. I like it. Obviously that's where to go and where to be with marketing. So I guess one of the questions I had, you made reference to Major Tom marketing agency. So one, I wanted to know if they're not local, right? They're
Toronto.
They're Toronto? Oh,
Yeah.
Okay. So when they provide, and maybe this will be a very fast response, when they provide their service, are they just providing the digital end of it, like doing all of the social media, that sort of thing? Or do they also come in and help with the strategy as to where the Chamber of BIA and actually also the municipality, because we contribute to marketing, do they come in and do that with you as well, like work out a strategic plan for that? Or is it strictly the digital spend?
So it is kind of twofold. They are working with us only on this one winter collaborative project, not the whole digital marketing strategy, but they provided the strategy for this campaign and the suggested spends, but we ourselves do the spends, but it's based on their suggestions.
Follow up?
Thank you. That's great. And thanks for that response. That's helpful. So right now in what you have spent, right, I think in your pie chart, you looked at 50,000 for marketing admin plus an additional 35,000 for the digital marketing. But you guys are talking about over 400,000 for next year. So I'm just wondering how you see that rolling out with regard to where you've been and where you intend to go with that.
Yeah, so working with Major Tom has been extremely helpful in that we're going to be able to have more of a strategy moving forward. They provided the insights for the one campaign, like I said, but it's going to help us get our entire strategy together. But at this point, that's just going to be our digital spend. We worked with them on the one specific campaign, but the 400,000 moving into next year is solely just our spend.
And just to add to that, I will say that the team that we've been working on with the SEO, we are looking at developing a very specific online digital strategy. So that will be part of that spend as well.
Okay. Thank you for that. Okay, thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
Councillor Withey.
Thank you, Worship, and thanks, Kelly and Torrin. That was good stuff. My question's kind of, I hope you don't take it the wrong way, but there's been a lot of criticism in the community about the initiatives that we're doing now during COVID, as far as attracting people from other zones. I guess they can't really get any worse in our zone in us now other than lockdown, but I certainly received a number of calls after we made the decision about the lighting thing. And I absolutely think that it's great. All your forward-thinking planning, but I'm just wondering, what are our other neighboring communities undertaking currently, like right now during COVID, compared to us? And I'm sure you're hearing some of the criticisms too. And I was wondering if you had a response to that at this time.
Sure.
Thanks.
Yeah. Yes. And we're extremely sensitive to that. And, I will tell you that other communities, certainly like Collingwood, they are marketing. We have not been heavily marketing yet. I think, and we don't intend to until we know it's safe for people to arrive. I think that the winter initiative in particular is something that, we're developing. We've always said that we're not going to be doing it unless it's safe. We're not going to be marketing it unless it's safe. I guess moreover, it may happen, but it may just work really well for our residents and for our community, or for the outskirts of our community. I think that the reality is we are a tourism community. The majority of our businesses depend on tourism dollars. We want to be ready. We're doing this because our businesses have asked us to, make sure that we're ready, and that our, Huntsville remains on the map. We did a great study with Polera through the accommodation tax group. We know that people are going to come anyway. So a big part of what we're trying to do is disperse, ensure that there's enough for people to do, give them opportunities to experience our community outside in the way it's meant to be. And, at the end of the day, I think, the messaging to our business community around protocols is extremely important. I think the municipalities initiative from the outset of supporting the businesses with PPE was excellent. It set the standard, it set the tone right from the outset, and we'll continue with that messaging and, be ready. I think, I don't know for sure, but I can tell you just, with some of our neighboring communities, we are well ahead of the game in terms of when it's safe to travel. We will be able to turn the switch on and do it safely, and continue to position Huntsville the way it should be. And remember that, most of our community is employed, so we want to keep people employed.
Thank you. That's an excellent answer. I really appreciate that. As I've said, I've had numerous people contact me and saying, what are we thinking? Don't we know there's a pandemic, and why are we getting people coming up? But I think you addressed it very well, and I wanted that to be out there. I knew you would address it really well. So, but I think it's important that people hear what you had to say. So thank you.
I appreciate the question. Thank you.
Other questions? I have one question, and I'll preface it by I really don't know the marketing business very well. So if it sounds a little old-fashioned, but we spend a lot of money on digital marketing. Is there any other kind of marketing that we spend money on, or is somebody else spending money on different kinds of marketing for our community? And one of the reasons I asked the question is because of that Polera survey, where people indicated they've been here, but they don't really know anything about Huntsville. So I guess my concern is, what are we missing? Are we missing target marketing, things like the theater, MHP, our trails, things like that? I know the website has, where to dine, what to do, but are we missing targeted things that might draw people here or make them know more about Huntsville, such as they know about Algonquin Park?
Well, I will say that a lot of what we do, we work very closely for what's called earned media. So we do a lot of press releases, and they pick things up like the Maple Trail. We're constantly looking for spins. I would say that most of the marketing that we do is digital, as you indicated, even the earned media. In terms of other tactile marketing opportunities, whether it be a billboard, or I'm trying to think of things that aren't digital that these days, brochures. You know, we discontinued doing an actual visitor guide. Was hard to get advertisers because most businesses were, you know, directing their advertising dollars to digital spends. And, you know, there's obviously less and less people picking up actual collateral like that. We do have brochures that we've distributed throughout Ontario about what to do, where to dine, those types of things, particularly to the Ontario tourism offices and Muskoka Tourism. But otherwise, I would say that with the limited budget that we have, to be honest, digital marketing is really the only way to go. And it is, you know, we're learning a lot through our new agencies and through our partnerships. And we've been bringing a lot of experts on board around how we can sort of tailor and target very specific markets. I think the best answer to your question, though, Mayor Terziano, is earned media, and we'll continue to do that as much as possible to try to, you know, access the other markets. And one last thing, short of just also, you know, the events, you know, I always try to reiterate this, and I will one more time, but when we have events, things like Muskoka Maple Festival, that is a digital marketing campaign actually, but it actually draws, let's say, 5,000 people to an event. I think the future of events is going to look very different for many years. So we're going to start, you know, looking at how we can do that. But those 5,000 people, and Ironman is another example. There's so many examples of when they come to our community and that word of mouth and that experience that they're having. That's actually, you know, also one of the best marketing tools we can ask for.
Okay. Just one other question on the looking ahead wheel where we're projecting 400,000 on digital marketing spend and 665 on product development. What exactly is product development?
That is mostly the light initiative. So it's actually some capital. There was something else in there, Torrin. What else was it?
It's the light trail at MHP, the lights downtown, the Lions Lookout track, track sets that we're getting for Nordic skiing and fat biking, and then the Grandview stuff as well.
All right. Are there any other questions from council? Oh, Deputy Mayor Alcott.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I promise this is really quick. I just, you guys referenced doing a lot of vacation planning for people, or, you know, sort of ad hoc as it came in. And were most of the people, or would you say almost all of the people, GTA centric? Or were they coming from other areas of the province?
I think it's still mostly GTA centric, but, and just to clarify that, we tend to draw more from the 905 as opposed to the 416. We are definitely seeing a lot of Ottawa, a lot of people coming from the north down. I don't have an exact percentage, but I think that gap is starting to shorten, particularly seeing people, you know, traveling within Ontario. But definitely the 905 would still be our main draw. Thanks again, everyone.
All right. Thanks, Kelly. Torrin.
Okay. Happy holidays.
Council, that's the end of our invited ceremonial guests, but we do have somebody that's been sitting in with us, Brian Crozier, that's here on behalf of the Junior C Otter lease to present with Greg Pilling, which is still down in our agenda a bit. So with council's okay, we're just going to move that up now so that we don't have to keep Brian here all morning. Is that fine with everyone? Okay, so we will go to 6.3.1 and the Huntsville Junior C Otter lease extension. Greg and Brian.
Thank you, Mayor Terziano. I think everybody knows Brian, so I probably won't do a major introduction, but Vice President of the Junior C Otters and a former long-term employee with our corporation. the Junior C Otters requested a lease extension. Their current agreement expires at the end of the 2021 season. This marks their 9th season here at the Canada Summit Center, and unfortunately the 2021 season has not been a stellar year given the pandemic, but I think they got 3 games in so far, and Brian can confirm that. But our last game got switched over to the red zone that we were planning when we were playing with Stainer. With the current agreement set to expire, we've been requested to extend the lease for an additional 5 years. The Otters have been an amazing tenant for us and providing our community with some great hockey entertainment, and there's no objections from staff to honor that request, and we're here to present that to council with any questions. The attached agreement outlines all the ice allocations, the associated costs, the facility usage, and they also have the advertising rights. New for this year is a request to be the sole provider of junior hockey in Huntsville and out of the Canada Summit Center. So there's an additional exclusivity clause there that's new, and that's the only drastic change. Annually, it'll be 2% increases, as has been for the previous 8 years of the agreement. Are there any questions?
Is there anything, Brian, you want to add before, now that you've sat through the first hour and a half of our meeting?
Actually, no, I don't want to add too much, but I'm used to sitting through these meetings anyways.
Well, thanks for being here and doing that. Are there any questions, Council? Councillor Withy.
Thank you, Worship. I'm curious about the exclusivity clause. Is there a threat out there, Mr. Crozier? Somebody's going to come in and cut your grass, so to speak?
Actually, there are other operators within the Muskoka Parry Sound area that are looking for homes that are in what we call non-sanctioned leagues that don't play within Hockey Canada. So you know, we would like to be. I think we've proven over time that we are a good tenant, and we would like to be the exclusive operator of junior hockey within the Canada Summit Center.
Thank you. I would agree with that, and certainly in the past, as you know, in past councils, we've been approached by these rogue leagues before, and certainly I would reiterate that we have no interest to have those people in our area, and I guess that's what you're trying to protect from. I don't have a problem with that. I think that I would hope that any future council common sense would prevail on these rogue leagues anyways, because they're not good. They're not great actors, and they often leave contracts, in the middle without, in the dark of night stuff. So I get it. Thank you.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Brian and/or Greg, I guess maybe Brian. With regards to the advertising, just what kind of revenue do you realize from that on an annual basis? And I see that that you also pay $18,000 and a few bucks for advertising to the town. So could you just sort of outline what's going on there with that, Brian or Greg?
I can take a run at that if you want. The Huntsville Otters actually have two portions of their contract which they pay to the town of Huntsville. The first portion is for actual use of ice and use of facility. So there is an amount there that's on an annualized basis that we pay with on a monthly basis up front. We also have the advertising rights to take in the Canada Summit Center and at the Ball Diamonds or Macaulay Robertson Sports Complex. And that is a fee that we also pay to the corporation. It's by the time we pay with HST, it's very close to, well, it's over $20,000 for us. It is an amount of money that we actually put. It's board advertisements. It's on ice. It's on machines. It's on equipment. We have people that are working as volunteers within the organization that spend quite a bit of time soliciting and looking for sponsorship within our community. And we have a lot of local business and local organizations that do support us that way. And it is, from our standpoint of view, the lifeline of our organization. We have revenue streams that are there. The largest being the ability to do advertising. Obviously, we have monies that come in through actually playing the games, so gate fees and stuff like that. And we do end up having to charge fees to players as well in order to play this game.
Further to that, Your Worship, if I might,
Sure.
just curious, Brian. So, what would the net? I guess is where I wanted to go with that. What would the net be from the advertising at the arena and the Ball Diamonds?
Thank you very much for that. The net, if I can recall, is probably by the time we pay the town the $20,000 and what we bring in from everybody else, we're probably netting close to $35,000 to $40,000.
Any further questions? Councillor Armour.
Thank you, Worship. Just more of a Merry Christmas, Brian. And thanks for supporting this hockey team. We're really glad to have them in town. It takes people like you to keep this going. So thanks for your contribution to us.
Thank you. I'll pass that on to my organization.
I neglected to read the resolution, and just before I do that, I will say Junior C hockey has been in Huntsville for my lifetime, and certainly something we never want to see leave. So I think this is a great resolution. Moved by Councillor Schumacher and seconded by Councillor Wiebe, it is recommended that the town of Huntsville enter into a 5-year lease extension with the Huntsville Junior C Otters, including the exclusivity clause, and further that the mayor and clerk be authorized to sign the 5-year agreement as attached to Schedule A to report Community Services 2020-18. All in favor? And that carries. So Brian, you're on the hook for another 5 years.
Thank you very much. I hope to be around for those. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, Council, we're just going to take a 5-minute biological break, if that's okay, and see you back here in 5 minutes. Yeah. Okay, councillors, come back. Some people's 5 minutes are longer than others. Oh, here we go. Okay, well, we have quorum back. We're missing Councillor Fitzgerald and Deputy Mayor Alcott, but hopefully they can hear us and they will come back soon. So we're on to new business. Corporate services, we have nothing on the agenda for corporate services. So we're into operations and protective services. And our first discussion is the Kent Park design concepts. So council, you saw the design and now Director Hernan is waiting for our direction as to where to go next. Councillor Weeb.
Thank you, Worship. I really liked the first concept that was presented. I know there's probably going to be discussion around whether or not to do a built structure in that space, but as a starting point, I did like design number one. I like the fact that it was a little bit more open space. It provided more smaller areas for separate seating, and all in all, I thought it flowed better with, I think, what the vision was present or sort of discussed by this council in the past. I know we've all had little things we wish we had in there of our own, but in the end, I think as a council decision, I think that comes the closest, and that's what I'd be in favor of exploring further.
Deputy Mayor Alcock.
Thanks, Your Worship. And to follow up on Councillor Weeb's comments, I agree. I like concept number one for the same reasons that he suggested, that you know, there's more open space. I do think there was a huge effort to create those sitting areas. It's more natural, and when asked about could we break up some of those solid uniform armor walls, sort of separating the edge, Allison seemed quite, sure that's possible. And I guess the comment I really want to make about what we've seen today is I think less is more in the case of where we want to go with Kent Park. And so I'm going to take a big bold step here and say that I know we asked for the drawings around the gazebo and the structure because we had, this is part of the whole iterative process of design, and I think it's all good. But from my perspective, I don't think we need the gazebo. And we didn't go over costs today. So my guess is that the addition of a fireplace in the gazebo probably adds a whole bunch of money to the project. And so from my perspective, I'm going to reiterate the less is more. And so I don't think the gazebo is required. And I also don't think, the fireplace concept, I think, it's one of those things that if you're going to do the fireplace, you do it big so that it's really a standout feature. And I just don't think you do it half-half. And given that I think there's a real need to be aware of what we're spending here, I'd rather not do it than, do it half measure. So from my perspective, I would remove the fireplace concept, and I would also remove the structure gazebo and really focus on everything else that Allison talked about, those Muskoka moments, seating areas, maybe a little bit of undulating on the whole park, and on the natural stone that she's proposed in those areas. I do like the granite paving around those areas. And I also like the idea of the striation look, which is also, I think, I'm not sure if that was part of concept one. Yeah, I think it was part of concept one. So with the brick, so, or paving. So that's where I am at. And I think that we're almost there from my perspective.
Councillor Withy.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm having a lot of trouble understanding what's going on here. I thought we had discussed at one point about putting this whole side of the project off. It was separated from streetscape. I certainly think that I'm hearing a lot from constituents not to go through with this now. It's expensive. It's a lot of people are coming to me with concerns about eliminating the parking. And again, I don't understand. I thought we already said no fireplace for liability reasons whatsoever and costs and things like that. Yet these things keep circling back around. I mean, when do we sort of say, stop with that, stop bringing us stuff that we said absolutely no to for very good reasons. I think if we move ahead with this part of this thing, I think we're dangerously out of touch with our constituents. Certainly, I'm hearing a lot of people saying, basically, are you kidding me? You're going to spend this much money in this place? We haven't even discussed public input or anything. And I'm baffled that we're talking about this. I think that this needs to be put off indefinitely into the future. We've got a lot of other stuff going on right now, and we don't need to be spending this kind of money in this place with these kinds of concepts that I don't even think fit with what the community wants. So that's my rant. I certainly, I don't know if there's a motion coming along with what we're discussing now, but I'll certainly not be voting in favor of doing anything for the near future on this stuff. It baffles my mind that we're talking about this amount of money for that place when there's a lot of people out in the community wondering what the heck we're thinking about. Anyway, I'll leave it at that. But those are my points. Thank you.
So we are going to get hopefully today to where we're going, but this is exactly what we had a motion on the table to bring back. So what's being presented today is what we asked for. It doesn't mean that we're accepting it, but we did ask for it. So it's before us because we asked. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would agree with Councillor Deputy Mayor Alcock with her assessment as well with regards to option one. The only difference I would make, I think in the earlier discussion with the presenters, with Allison, Deputy Mayor mentioned something about taking out some of the deciduous trees. I would argue against that. I think if we're going to have a park there with the amount of stone and so on and so forth, that and the paving stones and so on, I think shade trees become rather important. They have a cooling effect for sure. anyway, with regards to the fact that they do grow, and we do know they do grow. I think if Colleen could enter into this discussion, but I think there are deciduous trees that also have a certain height limit as well. So we don't want 80 or 90 foot maple trees for sure in there. That would be maybe a little bit of overkill. But I think there are trees that could provide shade that maybe are 20 to 30 feet high. I mean, we have 40 or 50 trees or whatever it is that are part of streetscape. So I think following along with that pattern as far as the trees are concerned would be fine. But I like option one as well, but I don't want to be removing any of the trees, I guess, from that whole process. As far as the gazebo and the fireplace, I'm totally in agreement. I don't think they're a necessity. And as far as the budget is concerned, and I know Councillor Withy's mentioned this as well, but I know we've looked at, I think, $400 and some thousand in the budget for Kent Park, but I think we could do a heck of a lot of good for considerably less, like maybe 50% or less of that. That's my comments, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Armour.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. Almost sounds like we've gone full circle on this now, from the original streetscape design that Director Hernan put forward to we are to putting a fireplace in, to now going back to just a regular park area without a gazebo, without a fireplace. So my opinion is I don't like option one. I like option two. I think option one's way too busy for that little area, creating all those sitting areas and etc. And so I'd like to see us go back to the original concept that Director Hernan brought forward. And let's see what that compares to what we've seen today without the gazebo and without the fireplace, etc. I'd like to see what that looks like compared to it now. Thanks.
Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Worship. I appreciate everyone's comments and input. I guess I have to kind of align myself with Councillors Alcock and Weave. I do like concept one, and I do like the trees. I understand that through fiscal responsibility that maybe we're deciding that the fireplace and gazebo, although I do like it in the design, may be not very fiscally prudent for us to engage in doing that at this time. I think would be remiss if we didn't do the work in the park while we're doing the streetscape. It'll be very disruptive, and there may be some damages to the main streetscape work that has been previously completed if we leave this for a later date. We did get a lot of public input on this during the streetscape original process of gathering information and going through the procedures. So I'm confident that we do have enough public input, and I've heard a lot of positive reinforcement from constituents that I've had discussions with. So I'm curious to see where the pricing comes in at, and I like concept one. So that's it.
Thank you. Councillor Stone.
So I agree with much of what I've heard here. I like concept one, and I think it's really important to go ahead with this. If we don't do it now, it won't get done. I think it's fiscally responsible to not include the fireplace or a structure in there of any kind. If a future council wants to do that, that would be fine. It's up to them. But for us, including it in streetscape is important. I think the deciduous trees and the shade they're going to provide is important. I love all the discussion around the boulders and the ones we can sit on, the ones that are big and beautiful, and Councillor Weed's giant one. I'd love that too. So I would like concept one without the structure.
Councillor Schumacher.
Through you, Mayor Terziano. Thank you. Yes, I'm in agreement with the concept number one as well. I agree with Deputy Mayor Alcock. If we're not going to do the fireplace big as the original concept kind of came to us, because that was the whole idea of that Muskoka feature and that wow concept that we wanted. If that's not what's on the table, then yes, at this point fiscally, it doesn't make sense to have what they're proposing as the fire structure and the fireplace and the gazebo structure. I would still like to see then we bring back our little kiosk or whatever at some point, because I think Santa needs some place to stay warm while he's down there this winter, and you know, at least have some sort of warming hut area for our silver ambassadors and whatnot. What that looks like right now, I'm fine with the old kiosk that we still have. And again, I guess I'm going to just keep reiterating from an accessibility standpoint, can we get I like that sort of stripy look in concept one. But if the speckled look is a better option for those with visual impairments or low vision concept, can we get some feedback along those lines? Because I really would not want to see an issue there with regards to different colorations.
I think I have to agree with the group on concept one. It was my favorite out of the two initially as well. I'm very much in favor of removing every structure from the park and having it just a park, just a place to sit or walk about or congregate. It's a very small square actually, and I think less is more, as Deputy Mayor Alcock said. I agree with Councillor Thompson, though, that the price tag that we have allotted to the Kent Park redesign is high, and with all of our other challenges, I would be in favor of us putting a cap on what we're going to spend on that. And if we can't do that, I would ask if we went out for a RFP for this particular design, are there certain things that could be tendered as alternate pricing so that we could cap the park costs, or can we just put a cap on? And I guess I would ask that question of Director Hernan as far as costing goes.
So just to refresh everybody's memory, the original budget we had from the original concept drawings way back when with the stage and whatnot was $443,000. It did have a small contingency included in that. That was before a building and a fireplace was added, which I'm hearing quite clear is not an interest of council, which is fine. We could go out for an RFP with a fixed budget. We are out for tender right now with our contractors for Main Street. We could look at their unit pricing on rocks and trees and see if the existing contractor, whoever wins that, could do this job within a budget line. Provisional pricing can be done, but it would be very difficult on this one. A provisional price would be for an added item like a structure or like a fireplace. To say that we want a park with a big flat area with rocks and seating areas and provisional price things, it would be difficult to try and figure out what they're provisionally pricing. It's usually when you're looking for a provisional price and option price, it's a fixed object. An example being on the Main Street job, the bollards that we've talked about on the Main Street, that's a provisional item. It's a separate standalone item. We'll know what that price is when the contract's open and we can decide if we want to move forward with it. We could use the drawing one concept and go for an RFP and given them parameters, and we could give them a fixed budget so everybody knows what they're bidding on. You won't see the three-dimensional drawings that I know that council's asked for. That's where we're going with Allison's group, trying to get that three-dimensional color drawing. If we go back to an RFP and a local contractor is bidding it, you're going to have to put some faith in staff and in the contractor on what they say they're going to do, and you know, check their references, check their previous work. If you want that detailed three-dimensional drawing, we have to continue working with someone like Allison, and that's what everybody would bid on, and they'd all know how big the rock is going to be that they're going to bid on. And that's when you don't really have a control over a fixed budget. It's a tendered price, if that makes any sense. We could certainly work within a fixed budget on an RFP. I know Councillor Thompson mentioned 50%, which would put us at the $200,000 range. Colleen McDonald, our parks manager, and I have been looking at that this morning. We think 200 would be a cheap looking park, to be honest with you. We would be scrounging to get it done. When you think the stonework in front of the town hall a few years ago that was done was about $48,000 alone for that entrance to the stonework. So when you start doing probably 3 times the size of stonework at Kent Park, removing the parking, the gravel, putting in some nice planting, putting in the street lights that we need to give it some illumination. 200,000 is certainly light. I hear what you're saying. If you want to reduce that $443,000 budget, we feel that 300,000 you could build a really nice park down there without the structure, without the fireplace. I don't know if I've complicated things, but something for you to think about.
Thanks, Steve. Me personally, and I don't need a 3D concept drawing anymore. What I see, I like, just as we've talked about it. I'd like to set an upper limit of budget, and if 300,000 is a number, so be it. If it's 320, so be it. But anyways, I'll go back to Councillor. I'm sorry, I think Councillor Armour, you had your hand up first.
Thank you, Worship. I just wondering how option 1 or option 2 are to the original options put forward, Director Hernan, minus the stage in the back, because I think we had all Muskoka stones in there in the paved area, et cetera, with the trees. Is that not correct? And I think that came in a lot lower, did it not?
So one of the final drawings we had is the one we did the pricing off, which came in at the 443,000. And it is very similar. Maybe Mayor Terziano, with your permission, I'd be happy to share a screen. I've pulled a couple drawings up.
Yep.
Let me just. So that was the concept drawing, if you will, with the colored picture. The final Kent Park design, which is the same thing when we added the stage back to it, that's the construction drawing. And I understand construction drawings are difficult to see, but it's not far off your concept 1, where we are today. Different configuration of the open area, private seating areas, things like that. But that was your final drawing that we agreed on, where the budget came in at 443,000. Like I say, remove the stage, remove some of the landscaping features, take in some of the private concepts that you want in concept 1 drawing. I feel 300,000 would be a reasonable budget to get this done. So I don't know if that answers your question, but if we pull back up the drawings that Allison provided us, if I can find them quickly. Maybe I can't. I will find them drawings. There it is. Share screen. That is concept 1. So in Allison's drawing, she's shown some entrances similar to what we had. A big, large, flat area. Obviously, I'm hearing you take the building out, planting around the outside. So I guess the key difference would be the stage is gone. That was one of the things that council had asked for at a time. So that is gone from where we were with what we'll call a final drawing at one point in time. So you're right, Councillor Armour, it is very similar. We've softened the lines. We've taken away that round shape. We've done some things with the stonework. And I hear Councillor Schumacher, she's raised a very good point about low visibility, and we'll have to do some more research on that one. It's got the armor stones around it. It's got the big boulders located in different locations. So it is very similar to what the final drawing was. It's just more of a different concept added to it, if you will. And we could certainly work with either one of these drawings. And I think we could deliver the product that council is looking for. If they gave us a fixed budget, we would go out and do it. My only comment is if you go too long or too low on the budget, it just cuts down on the items we're doing it. And I think it would look cheap.
Okay. Council, I think we have, and thanks, Steve, for that, because there's not a huge amount of difference between concept 1 and your original drawings, other than the fact that one's almost colored and there's more description as to the type of stone and the type of concrete surface, etc. And we've taken the stage out. So it seems that council is, consensus is concept one is what we would like to see down there. I'm just wondering if we were to do up a resolution that said that we are good with staff going out and doing an RFP for concept one, no structures in the park with a limit on the budget. Would council like to give staff the ability to go get this job done now that we've gone around the block forever? Okay, we're going to do a resolution that I don't know. We might move on to the next item while we prepare that. Does that make sense? Or yeah. So we'll get that resolution prepared and come back to it if that's all right with council, and we'll just move on. Yeah. Instead? Okay, hang on. We're going to take a break. Don't go away, though. We're just going to take a break to get the resolution done and pass it now.
Your worship, I'd request a recorded vote, please.
Okay, council, we have a resolution, and Crystal's going to share her screen so that you can actually read it and make sure that we have what's needed and everybody's in agreement. And then we will do the recorded vote, Councillor Withy. So the resolution would read, it is recommended that the Kent Park design is presented by Greenland Consulting at the December 16th, 2020 General Committee meeting be received, and further that committee endorse design concept one with the following changes: no covered structure and fireplace. And further, the staff be directed to go out for RFP for the completion of the project at an upset budget of $300,000. Questions, comments? Take that down. Are there questions or comments? Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Mayor Teresiano. I'm just wondering if we should have a small contingency in there, a bit of leeway regarding the, yeah.
Do we want to amend that 300,000 to plus a 10% contingency?
Sure.
Steve?
Mayor Teresiano, we have a contingency budget on the overall Main Street project. We are getting final tender prices in on January 6th. By the time that we get this RFP out and if we work with these numbers and if things had to change, we would be back to council. We would be able to tell you the entire budget for Main Street because we'll have the numbers known, and we'll be able to clear up any issues at that time, or if there additional spending was required, we'd be able to have that discussion.
So we'll leave it as is for now then? Councillor Thompson?
Thank you, Your Worship. You need a mover for it, and I would be honored to move this.
Moved by Councillor Thompson, seconded by Deputy Mayor Alcock. The resolution that was on your screen, and there's going to be a recorded vote, so I will turn that over to, I think, Crystal. I read the resolution. Yeah. Okay, recorded vote.
Councillor Thompson.
I don't think he heard that.
Councillor Thompson.
Yes.
Councillor Weeb.
Yes.
Councillor Whitby.
No.
Deputy Mayor Alcock.
Yes.
Councillor Armour. If she calls you at
Yes.
that time. Okay. Councillor Fitzgerald.
Yes.
Councillor Schumacher.
Yes.
Councillor Stone.
Yes.
Mayor Terziano.
Yes.
The yeses have it, 8-1.
Okay. All right. Finally, council, thank you. I have a resolution moved by, that carries, hang on. So I have a resolution moved by Councillor Stone, seconded by Councillor Thompson. It is recommended the committee approve the draft Beaver Dam Management Bylaw as attached as Schedule A to report Ops 2020-22, and further that the draft bylaw be forwarded to council for approval. Kevin.
Thank you, Mayor. So bringing up this Beaver Dam bylaw, this came out as issues with the Williamsport that we had. The main point of some of the highlight features from this bylaw, giving us the right to access properties, whether it be for an emergency or if we get consent from individuals. Allows us to know where these dams are so we can monitor them and we know what's going on in a lot of the areas. In consultations with the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestries, they referred us to an act under the Fish and Wildlife Act. Beaver Dams, Section 8.3 states, a person shall not damage or destroy a beaver dam unless the person holds a license to trap fur-bearing mammals. And then Section 8.4 states, this does not apply to a person or agent of a person who damages or destroys a beaver dam to protect a person's property. Also, we talked with the district and some other municipalities to see what they have for policies and bylaws to deal with beaver dams. The town is encouraging landowners to manage dams on their property or to give consent to the town to manage it for them before these become an issue. Being proactive with corrective actions when regarding these dams and altering them, whether it be to remove them or to lower the water levels, and doing it in the safest and most effective approach that can be taken. A resident may contact a licensed trapper and have him take care of this issue also. Private landowners are going to be responsible to monitor dams on their areas. And also they can ask the town for assistance and help. And we've attached a consent form there where they can get in contact with us and have us going onto their property and helping them with it. When it comes to an emergency response, under the Municipal Act, if there is some flooding going on, it does give us permission to go onto private property and address the situation right away. With this bylaw in place, whoever is the first one there, the road supervisor, whoever, they're going to see that there is an issue either happening or about to happen. Before any decision is made, he's going to be getting in contact with either myself, the manager, the director. We're all going to be consulted on it to make sure this is the appropriate action that is being taken to address this issue. By having landowners monitor their property kind of gives us an idea of where everything is, what we're looking at, and what we have to deal with and where they are, and keeping the health and the safety of the public and the cost to the towns down. all the works on private property are going to be going charged back to the private property owners. We are staying away from any reinstatements. Once you get into reinstatements, you get different opinions and everything else, and the costs are all going back to the private property owners. So there's no need for us to do anything and charge back again. Depending on where the dam is located on the property, whether it's close to the road and we can reach to it, whether it's just a crew of people going in with shovels to deal with it, or whether it's something we need to get machinery in to deal with, it's going to make such a difference in the restoration parts. Main thing to watch out with dams, if you have an active dam, the beaver's taking care of it, and it's going to make the dam bigger. You're going to have to keep an eye on the water levels. One of the biggest things is when a dam becomes inactive and the beavers are no longer present, that dam is going to at some time fail. So having the idea where it is and having it monitored to know when it's going to fail is one of the big issues. And I'm happy to address any questions that anyone might have.
Thanks, Kevin. Questions from council? Councillor Weeb.
Thank you, Worship. Obviously we've received a lot of feedback from the public, and there was one letter in particular that raised a whole host of questions. And I feel like at this time, I'd like myself some more time, and maybe staff to give it more time to look at all those questions that not only affect us, but also have implications with higher levels of government and different agencies. So at this time, I think I'd like committee to consider putting this off for a bit, because at the present time, I'm just not quite comfortable with the way it is in its current state. So I look forward to more discussion around it, but I also think that I'm prepared to move something that would put this off for a few more months, maybe.
Deputy Mayor Alcock.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I just want to say I completely support Councillor Weeb in what he just said. I appreciate the work that went into this, Kevin. But like Councillor Weeb, all of the letters that we've received, they've raised some really good points. And I know when I read the bylaw, I felt really uncomfortable because I was thinking about those issues, and thankfully those letters really highlighted it, especially around the importance of wetlands in our communities. I know there's a beaver dam really close to where I live, where I walk every day, and the wildlife there is incredible. So I think all of those other issues and looking at it through that lens is really important. And so I absolutely would support putting this off for a while and to do more consultation with other types of departments that would have an interest in this, certainly like watershed management and other groups like that. So I support Councillor Weeps. I would certainly second that motion.
Councillor Armour.
Thank you, Worship. I just wanted to say the sentiments. I agree also with Councillor Weeb. I think there's leaves this open for a lot of other interpretation going down the road for construction companies and property owners, and how do you control the watershed from one pond to someone else's pond that doesn't affect a road area. And there's just so many questions with this that I think we need to really put it on hold and have a really good look at it through magnifying glass.
Councillor Schumacher.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Terziano, to Kevin. I would agree with all of the sentiments that have come forward so far. And I guess my one question around the bylaw is, if you do have, because I know of a constituent in my area who has been allowing the town for years, and the previous property owner before him has allowed the town for years to come in, manage that beaver dam so that Old Muskoka Road, there's not an issue there. Now with this bylaw, all of a sudden, does that become his charge to manage when we've been doing it for a number of years?
Okay, I really have to wear this one, because when the beaver dam, the inactive beaver dam, broke out on Williamsport Road, and I went out and saw the devastation that it caused, it was me who said, we got to have something. I did not know that creating a bylaw would open up the can of worms it's opened up. So I'm quite happy to postpone this and to get some answers. But But in order for us to do that, we do need to give staff some direction as to what we want to see coming back. So if we're going to postpone it, and we can do that for a couple of months, but we do have to provide some direction. I'll go to Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think in Kevin's presentation, concerns about the landowner's responsibility sort of covered off by the fact that the opportunity or the offer is in there for the town to help with regards to this. The Williamsport issue was just one of many in my terms on council where beaver dams have let go, and it's been the taxpayers' responsibility to fix that problem. This one was almost $275,000 for crying out loud. So, I mean, if someone does have a beaver dam on their property, I think the offer is there. It's written into the bylaw and the presentation that Kevin made that the town would help out with regards to mitigating any responsibilities or any problems with regards to that. I think some of the other points are well taken. Okay, I mean, right. If it's going to have a negative impact on wetlands, okay, fine. That's one consideration. But if that's the case, then the beaver dam probably created the wetland in the first place. So how natural is that type of thing? I mean, on the long term type of thing. So I think those concerns with regards to the responsibility of the homeowner is sort of covered off by Kevin's presentation. The town will participate in monitoring those and helping out.
Okay.
Through you, Mayor. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Kevin.
Just to clarify, we did have legal consultation review this bylaw.
Councillor Weed.
Thank you, Mayor Trezziano. I take the point from Councillor Thompson well. I think that we're actually off to a really good start. I think the conversation just needs a little bit more fleshing out. But I do think that heading in the direction of the town being a resource and a support in this is certainly the right direction. So I think we're on the right track. I just think that we need a couple more months to address some of the other agencies, as was mentioned, the MNR and conservation authorities, et cetera, and just get the conversation going with the public a little bit more. I think, judging by my conversations that I've had and the feedback I've had, it seems, to your credit, it seems quick that it's happening. That's what we've kind of asked for, and the staff have delivered really well. But I think there are plenty out there who want to just participate a bit more and engage in this discussion, because I'm almost certain there are things we haven't thought of yet. And it just needs a couple more months of seasoning to really get it right, and to balance property rights and privacy with the general safety and protection of the public. So I think I initiated the idea to postpone it, and I would ask for maybe 2 months of postponement, maybe 3, and I was hoping that in that direction it would include just addressing some of the comments from the one letter in particular that I'd sent to Crystal that deals with some of the bigger questions. So I don't know if that's enough direction, but that's kind of where I'm hoping it goes.
Okay. Councillor Schumacher.
Yeah, again, I would reiterate that. I mean, some of the letters we've obviously read, research that I've done, it all depends on how long that beaver dam has been there, whether we're getting into environmental legislation with the Canada Fisheries Act, certain times of the year that you can't destroy, so yeah, I think just a little more sussing out some of these other levels.
Okay, I think we'll have a resolution. Councillor Weeb is going to move it that we postpone. Do we need a date when we postpone, or can we just postpone?
I think Steve's got his hand up.
Mayor Terziano, if I could, hearing what council has said, and I've read 2 letters, so I don't know, there must be a much more that I'm not aware of, but maybe we could just ask that you just vote this report down rather than postpone or anything. And if we could have all those letters forwarded to us, it would give us time to do some more research and deal with it and bring it back in a timely fashion when it's appropriate. But rather than postponing it and putting, a month's time to give us the research, why don't we just kill this report? And then if council that's received these letters and concerns could forward them to us, like I say, we've received 2, which I think we've addressed, but we'll certainly go through them all and do a more detailed report and bring you something new back rather than postponing this thing and having it hang out there.
We will do that, but I think if we just kill it now, then we can't bring it back for something like 6 months or within the calendar year or something. So I do have a resolution, and I will moved by Councillor Weeb, and I think there's a seconder out there, Councillor Schumacher. So something, it is recommended that the draft Beaver Dam Management Bylaw Report Ops 2020-22 be postponed to allow time for staff to gather further information on impact to wetlands as raised by members of the community, consult with other government agencies where necessary. So there's no time limit on this. So we'll take all the time we need in order to make sure we address any of the questions that have been raised. And we will get those letters to staff. Is that fair? Councillor Stone?
Should we include a public input portion? We've asked them to go to other agencies, but we haven't asked the public specifically for their input on this.
Madam CAO, could you help us out on that question? I don't know where to go with that one.
Oh, thank you, Your Worship. I was sitting here wondering who you're going to select to respond to it. Certainly, if that's a direction from council or from committee, if they would wish for us to engage the public. I think we have to remember what the intent of the bylaw was, and it was to ensure safety and protection of property and obviously fiscal responsibility of the municipality. But absolutely, if committee wishes for us to do public consultation, we can certainly do that through our website. Where we engage the community in the proposed Beaver Dam bylaw. So if that's what committee would like to do, we could certainly do that.
Also like some public consultation on this, we can add it to the resolution.
I would like to see it. If we are going to get into imposing fines or and such, I'd like to hear what the public has to say.
Okay, so if I can have the same movers and seconders, we will just add a third bullet point to that resolution that says we embark on public consultation. All in favor? And that carries. Okay, thanks, Kevin, for all your work to date, and I guess we've got some more.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving right along, New Home Community Heritage Center lease. Colleen McDonald's with us. I have a resolution moved by Councillor Fitzgerald, seconded by Councillor Schumacher. It is recommended the committee approve the New Home Community Heritage Center and Friends of Holy Trinity New Home lease agreement attached to Schedule A to report Ops 2020-21. Colleen.
Thank you, Mayor Terziano. Thank you for hearing me on this today. We have been before council and committee with this a number of times. The last time was in September of 2019. The direction from that report was to come back with a lease that would satisfy the parties involved, being the Friends of New Home Holy Trinity, as well as the town of Huntsville, that lease agreement. So attached in the report is that lease agreement for your review. And just a little refresher, what we were trying to achieve was the goals for all three parties being the Anglican Diocese, who currently own that property and cemetery and structure. So they would like to give that land, cemetery and building to the municipality. And then the Friends of Holy Trinity New Home would like to lease the portion of land and the building from the municipality in order to create a heritage center / community center for residents to use in the neighborhood. We think the lease agreement that we've come up with in consultation with John Riviere Anderson, their legal representation, we think we've got an agreement here that satisfies all parties. If there are any specific questions related to the lease or the process we've been going through, I'm happy to answer those now.
Okay, questions, council? Councillor Thompson.
Not a question as much as a comment, Your Worship, and that was basically to congratulate Colin and Steve for working on this. It is a good resolution to the whole situation, and it did have its wrinkles for sure as we went along. But you've done a great job in figuring it out and working it out with Mr. Riviere Anderson. And I think the nice bonus of this too is the folks in the Aspen area will now have a community hall that they can access, which you know is always a plus, I think, to help create community and so on and so forth. So anyway, just congratulations on a good job.
Okay, council, you've all heard the resolution. All in favor? And that carries. Thanks, Colleen.
Thank you.
Under new business, we have the Main Street construction detour and staging plan for information only. Steve.
Thank you, Mayor Terziano. I have a couple quick slides if I'm permitted to share my screen. Share from the beginning. So what this is and what we're presenting to you today is the traffic plan from the technical and construction team perspective. And our two goals in this was to create a safe work zone for both the contractor and the public visiting the downtown area, and to maintain traffic flow within and near the construction zone. What you will not see in this plan is a detailed description on where parking will be provided in the downtown area on some of the side streets, and some of the things which the communication group is working on to continue to get people to support the downtown businesses and attend the downtown businesses. We have provided this presentation and a lot of information to the BIA, to the chamber, to the SEAT group, to emergency services. And so they're working on their plans on how they're going to get people safely down to the shopping areas and how they're going to interact with them and where they're going to park. But this plan here is, if you will, is from the construction side on how we're going to flow traffic around the construction zone, the through traffic, and how we're going to make a safe work area for everyone. So as a quick reminder, the construction for all intents purposes is broken into 5 stages. And we do have an active construction zone in each stage and a passive zone. So the active zone is what will be dug up and will be worked on. The passive zone is the area that also will be closed to the vehicle traffic and will allow the contractor to set up their equipment, their storage of their pipes, their material handling and things like that. So they're basically taking 2 blocks at a time. 1 block they're working in, 1 block they're storing stuff in, and they will progress up through the town, and we'll talk about it in the stages that's been approved. When you look at this first map I'm showing you, it's a larger map of the entire town of Huntsville. And it shows what's going to happen on the outskirts well before you get to the construction zone where my mouse is moving around. So out on Highway 60, in this example, there'll be signage placed out here by the Muskoka 3 and Highway 60 sign, which indicates that businesses are open, that we do want people downtown, and we're asking them to follow specific detour routes. There'll be signage placed there. There'll be signage placed up at the Haynes and Earls Road on Highway 60. There'll be signage placed out on Highway 11. When you venture into town, there'll be electronic boards put up in certain key locations. So when you come in West Road, there'll be electronic board put up at Center Street and West Road, depending on what's happening with traffic that day, advising the public, advising them how to get to locations. There'll also be electronic board put up on King William Street when you're coming in, somewhere out by Cliff Street. Once again, directing and telling people what they're about to get into and which ways they're going to have to go. Electronic board out in the West End, out by the Yonge Street area on Main Street, and electronic board put on Brunel Road by the town line. Town Line Road and Yonge Street will become a major detour route for this project. So anybody coming in off Highway 11 that just wants to go out Brunel Road will be trying to detour that traffic out that way so that they can They don't have to come into the downtown and become part of this traffic issue that we're dealing with. And anybody coming out Burnell Road that simply wants to get to Highway 11 will be directed that route as well. When we look more specifically at the construction zones and what's going to happen. So the first construction zone that we're dealing with, which will start at March 1st and run till May 30th, will be the Main Street Bridge to Burnell. That area will be closed to all vehicle traffic, and it will be under construction. That will be dug up and it'll be worked on, as well as the chunk of River Street, and as well as a passive construction zone being from Burnell to West Road is closed. This is where the contractor will be allowed to set up and store his material. And this is the area that they will be working in. Why River Street? River Street is having some upgrades to the water sewer main, and also the storm sewer pipes lead out through this area for Main Street into the river. So this area all has to be under excavation. During this detour, and this is the major detour route that we're using, in Burnell Road for the traffic which continues in Burnell Road, it will be up Veterans Way and it will be across Center Street. And they would have to detour back on West Road to King William if they're heading out to the mall per se, or if they wanted to go to the Highway 60 area. This is a major construction detour route that we're going to be using throughout this project, and you'll see it's a common theme throughout. I know there was talk of Minerva Street and Mary Street. We have stayed out of that for the construction traffic flow because we know that the communication group, the BIA, is looking to use those streets for off-street parking to assist them. And they're using that for their event space, if you will. So we wanted to stay clear of that, and we've kept a wide berth around that area. The second phase of construction is when they move from Burnell to West Street, and this would be in June and July. This area would be under construction, including the King Street piece and the ramp beside the town hall that we're putting in. This would all be under construction for June and July. The passive construction zone would be from West to Center Street. This is where the contractor will now be allowed to store their materials, their equipment, and whatnot through the construction. When this phase is under construction, you can see that the swing bridge and that first chunk of Main Street will be reopened. It would be paved, the sidewalks would be in, it would basically be a finished product at this stage of the game, and this would be open. We still use Veterans Way as a major detour route and across Center Street, but a lot of the traffic coming in Burnell, if they want to hit Highway 60, can just continue down Burnell and out Highway 60. The third and fourth stage of construction are very similar. That is when they're working from West Street to Center, which would be under construction, including the intersection at Center Street. It's very clear in the contract that this intersection must maintain traffic flow at all times. So it's a little trickier for the contractor to work with, but it's a major route for emergency service and the traveling public. So it becomes a little trickier. Their passive zone, if you will be from Center Street to Lorne. This is where they'll be allowed to store their material once again and their equipment and stage themselves as they work their way through. You'll see at this stage of the project, we're starting to use Caroline Street and we're starting to use Minerva Street for traffic coming in the west end or going out the west end. So if you're coming in the west end of Huntsville, you'll be detoured around Minerva Street, down Minerva Street, and you can either cross at Center or you could continue down to West Street and then back onto Main Street. It would continue. Same as if you wanted to head out to the west end of Huntsville, we would be sending you up Caroline Street, across Lawrence Street, and back out onto Main Street. I have been in discussions with Andrew Stiller, our Chief Bylaw Officer. He is looking at Lawrence Street for us, whether or not they should be made no parking tollway zones for the construction period, which is what we're asking for. That way, if somebody was to park a vehicle on one of these side streets up here, there's a few parking spots. It could cause problems for vehicle traffic coming in, especially vehicles pulling trailers or large trucks. If they ended up in this area, it would cause issues. We have been in discussions with the manufacturers, mainly KWH. They're aware of it. They do everything in their power to keep their vehicles off of Main Street, and they will continue to work towards that, to keeping them off Main Street. So hopefully they won't be an issue. The next phase of construction is just a reverse of what we've seen. Once again, because we have to give the contractor somewhere to work, they'll be able to store their materials on this section of road here, their pipe, while they work from Center Street up to Lawrence Street will be under construction. And then this intersection has to have the connections made up there so that it'll be all controlled with traffic control, flag people during construction hours. Also in the contract, it's very clear language. It is up to the contractor to provide safe crossing for the school kids. We have a lot of school kids up there, and we'll be up there in the fall. They will have to put additional staff on place to assist our crossing guards to make sure it's always safe for the traveling public. The last phase of construction, if you will be in 2002. It'll be the final lift of asphalt for the project. It'll happen in May of 2022. The entire area is a construction zone because when they're doing a top lift of asphalt, they like to start in one lane and run to the other. No joints, no stops. So for 2 or 3 days next spring, we know that we'll have a lot of flag people, if you will, and rotating roadblocks. But the whole intent of this is just to make council aware. We are moving forward with this. Like I say, we have communicated this with the SEAT group, with the emergency services. We've communicated it with the BIA and the chamber. They're well aware of it. They're aware of the fact that they can't hold street festivals next year on the main street. But we have stayed off Minerva, West, Princess. We've stayed completely out of the Rivermill Park and Caroline Street. So it still gives the BIA and the chamber lots of areas to hold their events, to do whatever, pending on COVA, obviously, and what can be allowed without interfering. And the last thing I will just remind everybody, and I know we keep talking about construction next year, as per the contract, construction starts in 74 days from now. So happy to answer any questions if there's any, council, but this is just intended as an update.
Questions, council? Councillor Thompson.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Thanks, Steve, for that presentation, very detailed. Question I have for you, given the experience that we had in the construction last year between the bridge and Chafee Street and all the, I guess, underground infrastructure that they found that they didn't expect, and it really complicated that whole process and the project. How, and I know you've been talking to Mark Misko on a regular basis with this, so do they feel confident that they have done all the locates, you know, on Main Street from the bridge all the way up to Lorne? And how confident are they feeling about that? And as well as Bell Telephone, is Bell Telephone is part of the process here with their fiber optics under the street and so on and so forth. I'm just wondering how confident everyone's feeling about some unknown infrastructure underneath Main Street.
Through you, Mayor Terziano. So lessons learned from King William Street. There was a lot of unknowns, and there was a lot of mysteries on how to solve some of the unknown problems that they came across. So this contract, there's two things that have happened. One is last summer, there was a complete x-ray, if you will, of Main Street. They actually brought one evening, they brought a machine in and they x-rayed the entire Main Street to make sure they could see what was underground, to see if there was anything that was not located. The other key thing in this contract, from our lessons that we learned on King William Street, when we run into something unusual, because we think we ran into every possible scenario on King William, it's been written into the contract. So we know how it's going to be dealt with the consultants. We know what's acceptable fixes for the unknowns. So that was a lot of the problem with King William, is that when they found an unknown or they found a gas main that was hanging off a bell structure, they had to come up with a solution on how to fix it. We feel we've written all the possible solutions so that when we run into an unknown situation, the consultant will be able to say, here's the design drawings we'll use. This is how we'll fix that problem and we'll move forward. Will there be an unknown? We certainly think there'll probably be something else and we'll scratch our head, but we think we've covered all our bases. One of the biggest lessons we learned from King William II was trying to maintain traffic in a work zone. And that's one of the key differences in this. We've sacrificed the vehicle traffic to give the contractor the work zone he needs so he can get this job done in 1 year.
Steve, your plan's great. I take it that there'll be adjustments made when needed to the different traffic lights, you know, like at West Road and stuff, when traffic's supposed to be moving quickly through there, the left turn lanes, all that stuff will be adjusted as the zones change?
That is correct. There is a problem with the set of traffic lights at West and Chafee, and the district is looking into it because they're not as modernized and can pick up on the traffic flows. They need an upgrade themselves, but the other lights will be adjusted, and it's written into the plans, and it's on the consultant's radar to watch that. And as soon as we start to see problems with traffic, they'll be able to adjust the traffic flow through the lights, but there is some limitations at West Road.
Great. Thanks for that. Looks like it's well in hand.
Thank you.
I have a resolution, Council, on traffic speeds, moved by Deputy Mayor Alcock, seconded by Councillor Armour. Whereas the Public Works Department, in cooperation with the Huntsville OPP, have continued to try and lower vehicle traffic speed through education and enforcement. And whereas, despite best efforts to educate the public, members of council continue to receive speed reduction requests from residents of the town of Huntsville. Now therefore be it resolved that staff be directed to review existing speed limits within the town's road system and report back to committee with a potential policy for road speed limits in different areas of the town, as well as any suggested policy and/or bylaw changes required in order to make our road system safer for both vehicle and pedestrian traffic. Steve, did you want to speak to that at all, or?
I certainly can. This resolution comes forth. Last month, we had some discussions with Deputy Mayor Alcock and Councillor Armour on some additional road speed requests. And I think I've had discussions with every council member regarding different roads. And we said, you know what, maybe it's time we just stopped and reviewed our policy and took a serious look at it and brought something back for council to approve, so that we can say we've had the discussion, we've thoroughly examined all roads, we've looked at all road speeds. Here is the policy and the reasons why road speeds are set where they are. And then we'd like to think that we can get a policy approved by council. And if a request comes in, we can simply answer it by saying it meets our policy, or in fact, it needs to be adjusted. And here's the reasoning why. We deal with road speed complaints on a daily basis down here to the stage where it's just consuming way too much of our time. And we said, let's stop, let's take the time, let's quit doing these one-off, and let's figure out what is the right solution. I know Councillor Withy, we've had many discussions, and he's had discussions here about enforcement signs and how we can incorporate all that. And we're saying, let's take one good look at this thing and solve this problem once and for all.
Councillor Withy.
Thank you. I think this is a great idea. I'm wondering why we need to pass a motion for this, though. I mean, isn't it just something that staff can and should undertake? I mean, I just didn't, I was curious when I saw it why a motion was required when it's something that our staff are going to undertake. That's all.
Mayor Terziano, through you. So Councillor Withy, when staff undertakes a large project, we need some sort of direction from council to undertake that project. And we felt the size of this project and what it's going to involve, we wanted council's buy-in. We wanted direction from council that, yes, we want you to look at this. And that's the reason that we've asked for a motion to be put forth, so we can put the staff time behind the report now.
Councillor Withy?
So by approving this motion, does that mean there's a budget involved with this? Like by saying go ahead and do this, you can go and hire a consultant or something? Or again, I'm a little baffled that it's putting time aside. I think it's sort of part of the job, but just wondering about that question then.
Steve?
So there is no consultants being contemplated. It'll all be with staff time, but this is going to be a fairly large project. It's going to take a fair amount of staff time to review the existing bylaws that we have and the speed limits we have. So this is just council buying into it, saying, yes, this is an important project to us and we want you to move forward on it. So if another councillor calls us, or if we get a call from somebody, can you deal with this? We've got council direction on what we're working on and what we're working towards. And that way, when we bring back a policy, it's not like council saying, where did this come from? It's providing direction from council to staff to go and look at the issue.
You all heard the motion, all in favor? And that's carried. You have our permission to work harder. We're on to development services. I have a resolution moved by Councillor Stone, seconded by Councillor Wiebe. It is recommended that committee approve the draft control and licensing of dogs bylaw attached as Appendix I to Report Development 2021-29, and further that the bylaw be forwarded to council for approval. Andrew, you want to highlight something for us here?
Yes, I would. Thank you, Your Worship. So this is all part of our functional bylaw review, and now it's the turn for the control and licensing of dogs. Just to highlight a few things, definitions changed a few things, removed one, I think we added two. We've increased the fines slightly just to kind of keep in track with the other municipalities in our area. One of the bigger changes was we've added in a muzzle order. Two bylaws ago, if you will, we did have it within the bylaw. The current bylaw does not have it. We felt it's just a best practice to leave the muzzle order in. And just to explain, the purpose of a muzzle order is if a dog has bitten or attacked another domestic animal or a person, it's a way of preventing any further interaction or attacks on another dog or a person, and it's also to try to prevent further legal action. If a biting were to continue with the same dog on a person or another dog, we could get involved with the Dog Owners Liability Act, or DOLA as it's called, where there are a lot more restrictions. We can get court orders, things like that. So we're trying to prevent it going that way by having this ability to issue a muzzle order on a dog that has bitten or attacked a person or another domestic animal. One of the other things I'd like to explain is in the bylaw, it talks about bringing a lost or found dog to the pound, and the pound is the Muskoka branch of the SPCA. And there's a 3-day limit or a 3 business day limit that they are legally required to hold the dog. If the owner comes forward within that 3 days, they pay the pound fee, they buy a dog tag if they don't have one yet, and the dog is released to the owner. After that 3 days, there are several options for the SPCA to, I guess, deal with the dog. And one is, of course, adoption. Another one is to transfer the dog, and I apologize I didn't include this in the report, but to transfer the dog to another municipality or another SPCA for adoption purposes. Now, in the case of a dog that may be badly injured, suffering, things like that, we have, with the OSPCA and under the consultation of a veterinarian, had the dog euthanized. And that's not something that we like to do. It's not something we want to do, but sometimes it is necessary. And that's basically just to stop the suffering of the dog. That kind of summarizes everything. So I'm here to answer any questions.
Questions? Councillor Withey.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Andrew. I have a question, and it's a little personal to me, in that this muzzling order. I happen to own a big dog that actually he's been attacked a couple of times by other dogs, and there was no resultant injury or anything. It just looks like where it says muzzling, where it says where it has been proven that any dog has bitten a person or domestic animal, the animal control officer may issue the order. And then it says, the order says the animal that has been accused of biting, not proven, or I don't know what proven means, but then all of a sudden this muzzle thing takes into effect. And then at some time in the future, there's a hearing. It's almost like guilty until proven innocent. I know in the situations that I've had with my dog, that happens to be a big breed, people have, it's just been bizarre. It's I liken him to the big guy sitting at the end of the bar that, drunk guys want to take a poke at later in the evening sort of thing. And he defends himself, but he doesn't bite. He never has. My wife went out and bought a muzzle for this dog just so she could walk around the neighborhood without people freaking out because of these particular instances. But in the instances, he has not been at fault whatsoever. And it seems like this is just sort of, as I said, you're guilty until proven innocent. And the other question I had is we have an invisible fence. And when it talks about restraints, it talks about all these fence heights and things like that. No mention of electronic fencing, which has never been an issue with both of my dogs. In fact, I've had numerous dogs and they've all 100% always stayed inside the fence. They're trained on it. They don't even go near it. It's to the point, not that we do this, but if they get out even without their collars on, they never breach the boundary. So wanted to ask that question as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship. So when it comes to, you made the point there about the dog being allegedly or possibly biting. I think you're exactly right. We think we need to change that because I think it needs to be proven. Now, just because the dog bites another dog once, we're looking for a history. If it happens this one time, it could have been an accident. Maybe the dogs met for the first time. If it happens a second time, a third time, then we're going to look at the muzzle order. Or unfortunately, if there's been a case where a dog has been or sustained significant injury because of an attack and a bite, we probably would issue the muzzle order after the first incident. Now, when you talk about the invisible fence, that's great. I'm glad to hear that your dogs, are trained and stay within that. We have found in cases we pick up dogs that have gone through the fence because something is more interesting on the other side of the road. Dog has a tag. We look it up, call the owner. Yep, we're going to bring your dog back. And next thing you know, as you're up the driveway, you hear a yelp because the dog gets the zap coming back home. I think it all depends on the dog, the method of restraining. Some dogs do need to be tied up. Some dogs need a leash, a rope, something. Other dogs, like you've said, yours are trained to stay home on the invisible fence. Now, when it comes to the 2 meter thing of a fence, that's more going to fall into the, your dog is a little bit, I don't want to use the word dangerous. Excited maybe is the word I'll use, is overly excited when it sees another dog and it wants to go and see the other dog. But I think the 2 meter fence is going to come in when, the dog again shows a history, and it's just another way of restraining the dog. You could use a rope, a chain if necessary, as long as the dog stays on the property.
Okay. I saw another hand, Deputy Mayor Alcock.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Andrew, for the update. So, if I may, other than the issue around the muzzling the dog, it's primarily this motion is really dealing with housekeeping items. Is that a correct interpretation?
Yeah, through you, Your Worship, yes, Councillor Alcock. It's a housekeeping thing. It's all part of our review of the bylaws that we enforce. And like I indicated, there were a couple of changes in the definitions. I wanted to explain that 3-day holding time that the SPCA does. And then, of course, the muzzle order we're just bringing back from a previous bylaw.
Thank you for that. If I may, just a quick follow-up.
Sure.
It's with respect to the 3-day, is that would be consistent with other municipalities in Muskoka?
Through you, Your Worship, yes, that's correct. 3 days is a standard time limit.
Okay, thank you for that, Andrew.
You're welcome.
Councillor Armour?
Thank you, Worship. Just a quick one, Andrew. Do you specify that dogs have to be per? Do you sell them in town, or can you use them at the value? Is that what you're looking for?
I'm sorry, you cut out there, Councillor Armour. It was a little garbled.
Has to do with dog tags. You mentioned dog tags, and you have a new resident has 30 days to license their dog. But I didn't see you there where it says buy the license.
I'm sorry, where you could buy them?
Where you purchased the dog tag itself.
Okay, through Your Worship. So on our town website, we do have the information there. And just to make it public, Town Hall, Canada Summit Center, and Pet Value is where you can get purchase dog tags, or the OSPCA in Bracebridge if your dog just happens to be found and delivered there.
Councillor Withy. You're on mute. You're on mute, Councillor.
Thank you. Sorry, I must have hit it twice. I'm wondering if there was any thought to selling them through veterinarian offices as well, or I mean, maybe they don't want to, but just to sort of have it available in more places if we're imposing this this time limit for things, just to help that out.
Okay, thank you. Through you, Your Worship, I did fail to mention you can purchase either an annual or lifetime tag on our website now, and it's all automated. You pay by credit card. We get notified you've paid for it, and customer service actually mails you the tag. Now, to answer your question, Councillor Withy, we did several years ago sell dog tags at the veterinarian clinics. I would say about 5 years ago, we pulled them out because they were selling none or one a year. People were bringing their dogs to the vet and they were already licensed. But this is also at the same time where we offered a lifetime tag, which was still rather new. So instead of spending money every year, you buy one tag for the life of the dog. And the veterinarian clinics would explain this to the people coming in, and they opted for a lifetime tag.
Are those lifetime tags transferable if you lose one dog and get a new one?
Through you, Your Worship, unfortunately, no. It's for the life of the dog that it's on. So if something happens, then unfortunately the dog passes, you would need to buy a new tag.
Darn it. All right.
It's not your tag.
I need one myself.
You've all heard the question. All in favor? That carries. Okay, community wayfinding strategy. I have a resolution moved by Deputy Mayor Alcock, seconded by Councillor Stone. It is recommended that staff be directed to proceed with the awarding of the community wayfinding strategy, and further that $18,730 be included in the 2021 budget to be funded by the municipal accommodation tax to complete the community wayfinding strategy. Mr. Oval.
Thank you, Your Worship. The report just summarizes the results from the RFP we issued, as well as just providing a brief overview of the process that will follow to complete the first phase of the community wayfinding, an overarching community wayfinding plan to get the strategy in place, and then subsequently after that we proceed with fabrication and installation pending budget and council approval at a much later date.
Questions? I have one. I realize we don't get involved in selecting the successful candidates, but I do question why the third highest price won the bid when 50% of our criteria is on price.
Thank you, Your Worship. A valid question. It really just came down to the firm that had the lowest bid actually didn't have the subsequent experience or identified any experience at all with developing a community wayfinding strategy. They were predominantly an urban planning firm or planning policy firm that didn't have any experience at all. So unfortunately, that's where their score was affected.
And the second lowest?
Again, it was their firm when we were going through the process. It just, as we scored it, they didn't have all the experience that we wanted, particularly when it related to dealing with smaller communities. They have always traditionally dealt with bigger firms. We also had to take into context too that it was a firm located out of Alberta, I believe Edmonton. So we wanted to provide, there was an impactful decision there to be made too as well. If they're going to do some site visits and be on site, there were going to be some costs that being incurred from a travel standpoint as well.
Okay. And I have a second one. Is this a strategy, or is this the actual work where they'll be doing the inventory of our existing signage and identifying where it needs to go and what it looks like? Or is this just a strategy on how we move forward?
No, so to be correct in your first point there, Your Worship, they're going to do an inventory of all our existing signage and essentially go through the process of developing a map and making recommendations on where new wayfinding signage needs to go, as well as what needs to go on that signage. And that'll provide the foundation for the second phase when we talk about fabrication or installation.
So then our next step would be to actually purchase the signs and install them.
That is correct.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? Councillor Withey.
Thank you. I see in this motion it's $18,730 to be included in the 2021 budget by MAT tax. So it's not, so that's what's funding this. I just wanted to be clear that this isn't something that's going to come back on our actual levy.
Scott?
If I may, through your worship, yeah, that is correct, Councillor Withey. And then last year as well, just with some of the projects we'd identified, we recognized that some things just came off the docket, so we had this in mind. So we didn't complete some projects last year based out of the MAP budget, with kind of the long-term view of being able to use those monies to complete and fund this project.
Deputy Mayor Alcock.
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't have a question. I just want to say thank you to Scott and others for furthering this project along the way, and now we might actually see some wayfinding at the end of the tunnel. So thank you for this motion today.
Okay, all in favor of the motion? Carries. Under new business, the short-term rental accommodation in flood-prone lands. And there's no resolution on that. So this is for information. Director Maxwell.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a quick couple of points to mention about this report. Staff were directed to review options to consider allowing the short-term rental accommodation use within flood-prone lands. Flood-related natural hazards originate from several factors, including overland flow during major storms, from rivers experiencing higher than normal flows, from lakes where snow melt and precipitation can lead to shoreline flooding. Typically, flooding hazards occur from some combination of one of these sources, and the report contains quite a lot of detail on how the town's flood mapping was derived and where the information was provided that we use. Policies regarding development in flood-prone lands is very clear from a district, provincial, and local municipal level. Unless it can be clearly demonstrated, development is prohibited in areas that would be rendered inaccessible to people and vehicles during times of flooding hazards. Although our comprehensive zoning bylaw permits existing legal uses to continue within flood zones, no structures can be altered, enlarged, or changed, nor can any additional uses be permitted without going through a zoning bylaw amendment. This provision was included to ensure that development in these areas was restricted and that any risks were fully evaluated prior to any changes occurring on a property in a natural hazard area. Given that there's very specific risks for flood-related natural hazards in these locations, staff feel it's more appropriate to deal with individual properties on a site-by-site basis with site-specific zoning amendments where the specific flood risks, my goodness, I'm saying specific a lot, and site risks for each property can be evaluated by a qualified professional and support a zoning amendment. So that's a synopsis, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions from council? Councillor Wiebe.
Thank you, Mayor Terziano. I still notice, Christian, in the note that there's still the problem or issue of not being able to make sure that these residents would be empty during a potential flood. So so I feel like that the issue that, or the provision that we had floated about blackout periods I feel like that's the way to mitigate that. That's how we know that nobody's in these residences, whether it be a full-time renter or a short-term renter. Clearly there would be more control there, especially if it was a short-term renter, that they simply could not by law be in the residence during what would typically be the flood season. So I guess I felt like maybe that wasn't fully addressed, and I was wondering if you could speak to that.
Absolutely. That it actually is a two-pronged issue at that point. The zoning bylaw and all of our zoning policy and provincial policies that we need to review when we're looking at permitting different uses within a flood zone are very specific. And it would be very difficult, if not impossible, for staff to recommend any sort of zoning amendment that would allow that use in a flood zone. It's completely a zoning issue at this point and not a licensing issue from that perspective. The second side of things is if the zoning were to permit the use and we did issue a license with those specific restrictions on it, I think that we wouldn't know there was a problem until it was too late. We would definitely have the ability to include limitations on when the property could be used, but we wouldn't be able to proactively investigate and ensure that it wasn't being rented in times when floods might be happening. And then the other problem that we've seen in the past is that quite often floods occur very quickly and we don't know it's coming, or the property might be rented, but the people there might not recognize that it's happening, which in 2008, the winter flood that we had, it was very quick and very significant. So we wouldn't have been able to enforce anything at that point proactively. So there's a lot of limitations and problems that staff have noted just because of that. Hopefully that answers your question.
Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Mayor Terziano. Thanks, Councillor Weed, for your comments on that. I couldn't agree with you more wholeheartedly. I'm looking in your report, Kirsten, and in operational, these occurrences or a significant weather event happen regardless of the zoning on the property. So to have resources required to assist, I don't necessarily follow that line of thinking. I agree with the blacked out dates. We don't enforce a month-to-month or a yearly rental under the current zoning. I think this gives us an opportunity to do so. So, and I do understand that it goes against our policy, ROP, and the province. So how do we, I agree that it should come as an individual basis. I just wonder if we come up with some kind of a program to make this happen and for it not to be so onerous upon the people who are trying to utilize their property. And we can have a discussion about that. Thank you.
Councillor Armour.
Thank you. Thanks for the report, Kristen. I see this as something we brought upon ourselves. Once we introduced the short-term rental policy, we found out that all these people were now going to apply for licenses, and we found out they're in flood zones. And now we're saying, whoa, you can't have that. You're going to change your zoning. I would really like to see something, not only with the blackout portion for flood area, but for those who could be maybe grandfathered without changing their zoning right now, because some of them have been running these short-term rentals for maybe years and never had an issue. And if they wanted to, they could rent it out for 32 days and they're not falling under the short-term rental now. So I think we really need to look deeper into it for those who've been running these operations for many, many years. And going forward, those who buy in flood zones and want to have a short-term rental, then would have to change the zoning. Just my thought on that whole process.
Kirsten, did you want to respond to any of that, or you just taking it all in?
I can respond to Councillor Armour. The problem that we have is that the approach and the legal advice we've received in our whole short-term rental accommodation program started off recognizing that any existing short-term rental uses were not considered legal uses unless they were in a commercially zoned property. So when we did our zoning bylaw last February or January to permit the use, we specifically didn't permit it in areas where there was flood-prone lands and areas that were commercially zoned to begin with. It was only in residential areas. So the grandfathering of things, I don't quite see how we'd be able to do that without doing a zoning amendment to allow them in those locations as well. And then we go back to the same problems that staff wouldn't be able to recommend approval of any of it because of the risks associated with the flood-prone lands.
Councillor Stone.
So I tend to agree with Councillor Fitzgerald. I can understand your justification for needing an individual review of any given property, but for short-term rentals, I'm hoping that we can not make it hugely financially onerous to make this happen. So perhaps we can have special rates for applications that have to come, especially if they're going to have to bring a professional document with them. Perhaps we can have a very minimal charge so that they can bring the proper identification or the proper studies, and we can see it at planning committee. But just to bring a zoning amendments is how many dollars right now?
The current application fee, which will be going up January 1st, is $1,935, and I believe it's going up to $1,960.
Right, so two grand, and then we're going to have to ask them to bring a study with them. It seems crazy to me. Perhaps we can make an exception.
Councillor Thompson. Councillor Thompson, you're still on mute.
And made such great points too while I was talking to myself, Your Worship. Gee whiz. Kirsten, if an applicant does come forward and is successful with the rezoning, what exactly would their rezoning designation be? They're still in an NR zone or NR2 or whatever. What would their zoning be after being successful? They're still in an NR zone type of thing.
Through Your Worship, hopefully if they were able to demonstrate that perhaps our mapping was wrong and that the flood elevation on their property was in the wrong location and the dwelling was located outside of the flood area, or if the wave uprush factor was maybe not as high as it should be based on any environmental considerations in the location, we would change the zoning to not consider it NR zoning and demonstrate that the property actually was maybe more appropriately zoned as a shoreline residential or residential zone. Pending anything else, we would add an exception to the zoning to add that as an additional permitted use.
So if I may, Your Worship, so right now, if I'm not mistaken, I think the contour that designates what it would be in a flood zone is what, 285.5 meters, I think, is the contour that would designate that. So that wouldn't change their situation for rezoning. I mean, in other words, I think what I'm getting from committee is that they're looking for a blackout period, but if they're still below that 285.5 meter contour, they would then be turned down as far as their application is concerned, because that's what determines the flood zone now, if I'm not mistaken.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, the flood elevation is very specific, and on each lake in each portion of each of the rivers, it's actually a different elevation. And then there's also the wave uprush factor of another ½ meter that is considered on bigger lakes too, where so the elevation in the building envelope or openings into the building have to be above a certain elevation. That changes depending on where you are. So if an applicant wasn't able to confirm that either the dwelling was located on lands that weren't going to flood or any mitigation could occur that would prevent flooding, we wouldn't be able to support a zoning amendment to permit the use.
Okay, Councillor Weed?
Thank you, Your Worship. I would just like to make a final comment, and that would be to encourage committee and staff to think of it just in these simple terms. How do we ensure, or how do we best ensure that homes that exist in flood zones that are potentially dangerous, how do we ensure that nobody's in those homes during a flood season? And I would leave it at that, because that's really the question that I'd like to have answered to the best way possible. And I think that having people in long-term or living there all year round isn't the best way to do it. You can't black out a long-term tenant out of their home. The only way you could do it is through a short-term rental and put those parameters around it. So I would leave that, I want to leave that with everyone and to think about.
I think, I know what you're saying, Councillor Weed, but we also don't know exactly when it's always going to flood. A flood doesn't just happen on April 15th and no other time of the year. But I think I just want to summarize this. So right now, they're not allowed in an NR1 or NR2 zone. They can make an application for a zoning amendment, and if they qualify, then they would be exempt, or we would change the zoning. One of the big issues is people have been there and doing it for quite some time. So we could consider a reduced rate for that particular rezoning application for a period of time if we wanted to do that. Is that correct, Kirsten?
Council can direct staff to charge whatever rate they felt appropriate for those types of applications if you so wished.
But we could open a window up, maybe January 1st to March 31st, saying anybody that's within these areas can make application for a zoning amendment at a reduced rate if we want to set one of those. Now, I know some councillors have suggested that the fee is too much. The whole grandfathering thing, I mean, the reason we're licensing short-term rentals is to ensure they're safe. So unfortunately, flood zones are one of the reasons that potentially make them unsafe. Councillor Withey, go ahead.
Thank you. A quick question, and you just mentioned it, Your Worship, and Kirsten, you did too, is people could file for a zoning amendment as a remedy for this. But just in all honesty, how likely is that to be granted if they're still in the flood zone? I mean, why even discuss that as an option when it's probably pretty unlikely that they're going to prove to us that, oh no, even though it was underwater for the last 50 years, it's no longer in a flood zone. Pretty unlikely, I'm guessing.
Through you, Your Worship, I would, depending on what sort of supporting documentation was submitted with the application, it could allow staff to recommend that, yes, the zoning should be approved to change it to a short-term rental or to add a short-term rental as another use. However, it is just as likely that staff wouldn't be able to recommend approval. However, the final decision always rests with council for a zoning amendment. So.
Deputy Mayor Alcock?
Thank you, Your Worship. I think another way of looking at this, I'm glad that Councillor Withey said what he did, because, we can say you can reduce the rate on a zoning application and to help the people, pay for that. But it's unlikely staff is going to recommend it. So the will be on committee to say, whether or not we want to approve the application. I think that the thing, though, I kind of go back to what Councillor Armour said. You know, this is people who have been doing it for a long time, and it's sort of like their collateral damage on our short-term rental licensing bylaw. So they're trying to be good citizens to come forward and say, we need this license, here we are. And in fairness, you know, and I completely understand Kirsten's report. It makes all the sense in the world. We're trying to discourage, you know, further activity in our flood areas. But the fact is, these people have been doing this and we're kind of penalizing them. So I don't know what the solution is, but I do feel like we need to find something that, and whether it's the blackout clause, Councillor Weeb, I don't know, but I'm certainly interested in trying to find that common ground for those people who are trying to be good citizens and get a short-term license and have been doing it for a long time. Because the upshot is, if we don't do anything, they'll probably go ahead and do it anyway, right? Like, I sort of think, okay, well, or not apply for the license or the zoning application, which will be turned down. So it's a bit of an odd one. And I do think that there's good faith out there in the community of people who have been doing this and are trying to comply with our new policy. So I sort of, it's a really hard one. If we take the black and white approach, I'm not sure we're going to get anywhere. So I think we've got to find that gray area. And I'm not sure what the gray area is, other than trying to meet the interest. So that's my comment.
Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Mayor Terziano. Thanks for everyone's comments. I guess there's a profound flaw in the essence of the OP and the provincial policy statement. We're set up to protect the visitors who want to stay in an Airbnb and not year-round residents. So that is flawed to me. We want these people to come and do a zoning amendment, but we've only considered the fees. So we haven't considered the costs of all the professional services that they require to support their application. So it's really onerous. So I think that what we should do, and I don't know how we do this, Kirsten, and I'm sure you're gonna laugh when I say it, but why do they have to go through the process? Why can't they just come directly to committee?
Kirsten?
Sorry, Councillor Fitzgerald, you're asking why they would have to go through the zoning amendment process or provide the supporting documentation?
Both. Why do they have to go through the process? Why can't we just give them an accepted use at committee without going through the process? This is the gray area that Deputy Mayor Alcock discussed.
Yes. I think the problem is that they can't be issued a license without having the correct zoning. And they can't have the correct zoning unless they go through the formal zoning amendment process. If it's just because the way the existing bylaw is crafted that it's not permitted in any of the flood zones. So if committee wanted to permit the short-term rental use as a blanket permission in any flood zone, that would be a zoning amendment that would have to be initiated by the town because it still has to go through a public consultation process. And in that instance, staff would not be able to support anything to do with that type of an application, just as I've alluded to in my report. So that's where site-specific amendments, each applicant is providing their rationale as to why it's okay on their property specifically. Does that answer your question?
It does. And you made, can I follow up, Your Worship? Yeah. You made reference to the bylaw, the way the bylaw was set up. So I've suggested this before, that we actually change the bylaw. And I don't know how we do that or if we can do that, but you specifically said the way the bylaw is set up. So perhaps we set it up wrong for all these NR zones.
Kirsten, are there other zones that don't permit short-term rentals?
At this point, every zone where residential use is permitted, a short-term rental use is permitted. But the NR zones do not permit, all except the NR2 zone in some circumstances, don't permit residential uses as of right. It's only anything that's existing on site that's permitted.
So we're at the stage now where we wouldn't approve the building of a residential unit in a flood zone.
No, although there have been applications to committee over the last few years where we've done additions to existing houses, and in some circumstances there's been minor changes, but staff have not recommended approval of any of them.
Councillor Schumacher.
Thank you, through you, Your Worship. So yeah, I mean, I guess I go back to Councillor Armour's point: is there not a way to grandfather these existing, if that's where all the issue is the existing structures and places that are there? And to Councillor Weave's point, why is it okay then to do a year-round rental at that particular place, but not a short-term? If we're going to look at one versus the other, why not have the blackout for both?
So Kirsten, we grandfather in residential uses in flood zones, but we can't or won't grandfather in short-term rentals in flood zones.
No, Your Worship, because the short-term rental use wasn't considered a legal use. The only uses that are permitted to be grandfathered are those that are legal at the time they're established. So if we take the Big East, for example, the houses that are there were all constructed in the 50s and 60s when we didn't have the same regulations that we do now. And I wouldn't say we weren't aware of the flooding potential, but the flooding potential wasn't recognized as much at the time, which is why existing residential uses in those areas can remain, but they can't be expanded without going through a formal process.
Okay, so even before we started licensing short-term rentals, it wasn't a permitted use in a flood zone. So anybody that was renting them was doing so illegally, basically.
I would confirm, yeah, that any short-term rental that existed prior to our licensing and the zoning amendment that we did last year weren't considered legal uses at the time unless they were in a commercial property.
Yeah.
So we're not just dreaming this up. This is we're not penalizing them because actually they weren't allowed to do it previously. Okay, where do you want to go from here, Council? Councillor Fitzgerald.
I liked your suggestion of a window where they can come in and make that application, and committee they go through the process at a reduced fee, and it comes to committee, and committee, when we see fit, will make exception.
Do you want to put forth the motion to that effect?
Sure I do.
Crystal, are you typing? Oh, the motion would need to suggest what the reduced rate would be. Kirsten, before anybody answers that, what's our actual costs on a rezoning where, advertising's, real costs?
The circulation costs of an application change depending on if they're in the urban area or a rural area, because we do notification in the newspaper or by mail. So we can't specifically designate a specific amount to any application without knowing exactly where it's located.
Could you give us a ballpark that as long as we're charging 50% of the rate, we aren't going to be out?
Absolutely, 50% would cover some staff time as well at that point. So
would council be okay, or Councillor Fitzgerald, or Councillor, whoever's moving it, would you be okay at 50%? Councillor Fitzgerald.
Yeah, I would be fine. It makes it fair and reasonable. Now, how do we approach all the reports that are going to be required to support this application? Because you're looking at now thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. And, we've got, I think a lot of the cases, and why I'm advocating for this so heavily, is that a lot of these are young families, and this is what is allowing them to stay in our community with this financial assistance. So, how do we control the costs of all the reports that are required, and what is actually required, Kirsten?
So the types of reports that would be required to give staff an opportunity to review and determine whether or not we could support an application could include a survey, a geodetic survey, hydrogeological reviews to see if the wave uprush calculations are specifically what we think they are in those locations, or if there were possible amendments. But I would reiterate that those studies are what would make staff able to support an application. If someone were to submit a request with no studies, we wouldn't be able to say that, yes, we thought it was a good idea to add that as a permitted use. However, council would have the opportunity to consider it regardless.
Councillor Stowe?
So I think staff would have a hard time recommending approval regardless of the studies that come. Perhaps we just do as is suggested, give them 50% off our fee. They come, make their case, and the committee will decide, because I don't think staff will ever recommend approval, or rarely.
Councillor Weed?
Thank you, Your Worship. Would it be incumbent on us as a municipality or the applicant to know the history on the flooding in the area? So what I'm saying is, should our staff have in advance prepared the documentation that would show how much flooding has taken place when throughout the last, 30 years? At least then we'd know, to your point earlier, Mayor Terziano, we don't really know the exact dates of floods, but I bet you we know when 98% of them are between which periods, in support of what I would call like a blackout period. So I guess I'm wondering, does that fall on the applicant, or would that fall on staff to collect that data?
Kirsten?
I'm afraid that I wouldn't know whether or not we would have the ability to determine what all those dates would be, because different locations would have different potential flooding times, I would think, as well. In addition to that, then council and staff would be taking on all of the liability associated with it. If a zoning amendment was approved and a license was issued for a property that could flood, and we said the blackout period is March to May, but then it floods in June, then I think there would be some further implications there. I'm not sure. I'd have to look into it.
Councillor Worthy?
Certainly, if I put my insurance hat on, I would not recommend trying to pinpoint seasons of whatever's going to happen. We're in a very unstable time, climate-wise, globally. There's been more catastrophic losses in the last few years than have been in the last 100 years. So, to your point, Kirsten, I think that we don't want to take on that liability. In fact, I just saw something actually popped up. There was a recent flood. Was it a recent flood? Oh, no, I'm sorry. The Ontario windstorm cost $87 million just recently in Toronto and Hamilton. So, I mean, climate change is here. We can't say to people, you're okay, you're not going to flood this time because you haven't forever. So I don't think it's prudent for anyone to try to predict when there's going to be, events happening and blacking out times. Thanks.
Okay, so I have a resolution that I need a mover and seconder for about allowing a reduced rate application period, and I need 2/3, I guess, to pass it. So I need a mover and seconder for it first. Councillor Fitzgerald and Councillor Weeb. It is recommended that staff be directed to open a 3-month window in the first half of 2021 to allow existing operators of short-term rentals in NR, NR1, and NR2 zoned lands to submit applications for a zoning amendment at a reduced rate of 50%. Questions, comments? Councillor Armour.
Thank you, Worship. So if you submit a 50% rate and you're denied your lost set income though, right? That fee's gone, correct?
Yeah. Madam CAO.
Your Worship, thank you. Just to note that we are sitting at General Committee today, so this direction won't be ratified until the end of January. So just wondering if a 2-month window is sufficient.
Well, it just says in the first half of 21. We just haven't identified the window, so.
Oh, sorry, I thought I heard you say March. My mistake. Thank you.
Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thank you. Just to confirm Councillor Armour's comment and the response, if an application comes in, it always comes to committee, correct?
Yep.
Yeah, that is correct.
Yeah. Okay. So if it doesn't come in with the supporting documentation and you recommend that it not be approved, it comes to committee, and if committee finds there's enough information. Okay. I like the process, and the 3-month window seems fine and fair. So thank you.
The only comment I'll make before I call the question is that committee or council needs to be aware that we're suggesting to the community, pay your money, you won't be recommended, but we'll approve you. That's what the suggestion we're putting on the table here is. So, Councillor Fitzgerald.
Yeah, I'm hoping that everyone goes through the process and can justify the zoning change. You know, that's the world I live in anyway. If there's extenuating circumstances and you know they're close to the criteria, then the committee has that final say. So, no, I hope that everyone goes through the process.
Deputy Mayor Alcock.
Thank you, Your Worship. I concur with what Councillor Fitzgerald said. I can see how that would be the interpretation, but the flip side is we're saying, no, we actually want people to go through the process. And we're the gray areas, we're allowing them at a reduced price because of all of the reasons that have been talked about. But we are actually trying to legitimize those short-term rentals that have been around if there's a compelling reason. But the onus is still on the applicant to give us that compelling reason. And so I think that the interpretation is broader than what you're suggesting.
Okay. Call the question. All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and that is more than 2/3, so that carries. All right. I have a resolution moved by Councillor Alcock and seconded by Councillor Stone. It is recommended the committee approves the Downtown Community Improvement Plan Financial Incentive Program as outlined in Schedule A of Report Development 2021-28 to provide support for businesses within the CIP area, and further that the Downtown Community Improvement Plan Financial Incentives Bylaw be forwarded to Council for adoption. Kirsten, do you want to highlight anything on this?
I will just quickly note that the existing bylaw didn't seem to have incentives that were very helpful in stimulating any development. So what we've done is we've added programs that include the facade and signage improvement program, as well as a property improvement program, which we've lumped in greenery enhancements and accessibility as well. so that those 2 additional programs would be added to the existing suite. And the bylaw's been revamped to make it a simpler, cleaner process with the hopes that it's more accessible.
Questions? Deputy Mayor Alcock.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Kirsten. I like the report. I do have a question, and I certainly obviously support it. But is it a bit onerous if one of the businesses is applying for a $2,000 grant to do some painting on the front? Is it onerous to ask the owner or the applicant for that to submit 2 quotes? I think the minimum requirement for any of the contracts was a minimum of 2 quotes. And I just think, if it's a small project, I don't know. I can think of 1 or 2 projects that went ahead and they were around that amount, and they went straight to one person who did it. So your thoughts on that would be appreciated.
Sorry, I'm just reviewing the details of it, so that the signage improvement grant, that we would cover 50% of the eligible costs up to a maximum of $5,000, and that we'd be requesting. I think it's just, I don't see where it says that we'd be asking for 2 quotes, though. I'm sorry.
Okay, I think I did
general
read it.
provisions. I'm sure you did. No, absolutely. We might have to.
Sorry.
I was going to say we might have to tweak and just specify that if it's under a certain amount, we wouldn't be looking for multiple quotes.
That would be, from my perspective, I think that would be an important tweak, because I think it makes a lot of sense if we're providing, $20,000 or something, but for a small amount, I just don't get that. So if that was a tweak that could be made, I think that would be really good. Other than that, I wish there was more money in the program, but I won't go on about that. So thank you for the work you did on this.
Okay, all in favor? And that carries. And that council pretty much does it. We have no closed session. I have no COVID update. So I have a resolution moved by Councillor Thompson and seconded by Councillor Withey. It is recommended that we do now adjourn at 1:45 p.m. All in favor? And that carries. And thank you, council, very much, and thank you, staff, very much, and Merry Christmas to everyone, because we don't have to meet again until January of 2021.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
Merry Christmas.
Cheers. Have time with your family, close family.